Chapter 91 Omega Mutant, Supreme Power and Potential. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Logan, you're young again. The next morning, at the table in the cafeteria, Caliban looked at Logan's black hair. There was no longer any white hair, and his face looked much better. However, he was not too surprised by this. He knew that Logan's self-healing factor was recovering and it was normal to become younger. Logan just nodded lightly. With the self-healing factor fully restored, his physical and mental state were better than ever. Even though he drank late into the night with Victor last night, he was still very energetic now. Victor on the side looked a little crispy. After a night of hangover, he was obviously not fully awake yet. His hair was messy and he was yawning again and again. He looked like he was not awake. Looking at the energetic Logan, he couldn't help but let out a long yawn and said, "It's the same self-healing ability, but the difference is too big." He looked envious. After all, everyone longs to be young after their body ages, but his own self-healing ability cannot achieve this. Logan's self-healing factor is different from yours. His X gene is evolving and mutating. Charles spoke at the dinner table, introducing Logan's situation. Mutation. Caliban looked up from his plate. That sounds weird. Is it weird? Victor disagreed. We are now the product of mutations. It is the genetic mutation that makes them mutants. Whether it is him, Logan, Caliban, etc., although their abilities are different, they are actually all mutations in essence. Charles on the side put down the coffee in his hand and said with a smile, "Guys, mutation is not surprising. I think it should be a matter of pride. Mutation is the main way of evolution on this planet. All evolution occurs in the process of mutation. And we are honored to be chosen by nature to be the first to complete the mutation." He has always believed that being a mutant is a matter of pride. This sense of superiority does not come from strength, but from natural selection. From beginning to end, he felt that the emergence of mutants was very normal, just like the first fish to climb out of the sea and try to live on land hundreds of millions of years ago. Perhaps in the eyes of the fish at that time, the guy who climbed onto the land was looking for death. Its mutated lungs looked as weird as a heresy in a cult to other fish that used gills to breathe, but that fish succeeded. Through repeated mutations, it and its descendants survived on land and reproduced a variety of creatures, creating today's complex and chaotic environment. Charles believes that they are all that fish, completing an unprecedented transformation. Perhaps in the future, all humans will complete similar mutations, and they will be the pioneers of mankind. The professor is going to start lecturing again. Caliban buried his head back into his plate with a bored look on his face. Ever since the professor became the teacher in the asylum, he has always been like this, talking endlessly about the X gene. I agree with the professor. Logan stuffed the sandwich from the dinner plate into his mouth, chewed and said, "Mutation is the normal state of living things. The reproduction of any living thing is a process of continuous evolution." The professor nodded and smiled with great approval. Logan is right. This is how we mutants grow in constant mutations. The mutation of the X gene gives us mutants some unimaginable talents, and can even give birth to Omega mutants. These words once again aroused Caliban's interest. He raised his head and asked curiously, "Professor, what exactly does it mean to be an Omega mutant?" He had heard this name many times, but he only heard about it. He didn't know what it was exactly. After thinking for a moment, the professor said, "Supreme power, endless potential, and something that cannot be defined or measured. This is the Omega mutant. The strength of Omega mutants is immeasurable. Although professors have done research, most of them only understand the terror of Omega mutants in theory. After all, Omega mutants are so rare that the professor has no chance to study them in depth." Caliban was stunned when he heard this, and then smiled and said, "Professor, how is this possible? According to what you said, Omega mutants are not godlike existences. Unlimited power, immeasurable strength, capable of destroying stars, this sounds like a fantasy." Caliban does not believe that anyone really has such strength. Charles was silent for a while and said solemnly, "From a certain perspective, the power of Omega mutants can indeed be called gods. He is very aware of the strength of Omega mutants, which is a terrifying force that can destroy the entire Earth. It is not an exaggeration to say that such mutants are gods. Caliban was stunned. He saw the solemn look on the professor's face at this time, and asked cautiously, but such a person shouldn't exist. If it does exist, it would be too scary. Charles glanced at him and suddenly fell silent. His old eyes seemed to be recalling the past, with a look of melancholy on his face. After a long time, he slowly said, "It existed before, but now, it's gone." Logan looked at the professor and fell silent. He knew that the Omega mutant the professor was talking about was Jean Grey. She was the most promising mutant in the academy back then. Wolverine had witnessed her power and was even almost killed by her power. Even looking back now, it was a sad history. "What are you talking about?" While they were talking, Lorna, Marcus, John, and Klaus sat down with their plates and asked with interest. "Listening to the professor's class." Logan shrugged and looked at the professor. "If you are interested in some topics about the evolution of the X gene, you can go to the classroom together later to listen." The professor smiled at a few people. Lorna and Marcos waved their hands and refused. There are still things to be busy with. Several people were sitting at a table, chatting and eating breakfast. The scene was very harmonious. While eating, Marcus suddenly said, "By the way, something else may have gotten into the shelter recently." As soon as these words came out, the timid Caliban suddenly panicked. "What is it?" "The other mutants and the guys on the picket team are not in danger, are they?" Seeing Caliban's panic, Marcus quickly smiled and reassured, "Don't worry, it's not a threat, it's probably a wild beast in the forest. Recently, the sheep in the sheepfold have been snatched away by wild beasts from time to time. But we couldn't find any trace of the beast." "Oh." Caliban immediately felt relieved. As long as there was no danger to the entire sanctuary, he patted his chest and said, "As long as there is no danger." After saying that, he continued to eat his dinner with his head down. However, Logan on the side became interested and looked at him with interest. What kind of beast is so powerful that it dares to enter a shelter full of mutants and steal sheep? "We don't know either." Marcus shook his head helplessly, and then looked at Logan. "This is why I brought this up. If you are free, come with me to see if you can find any clues." Victor on the side suddenly came over with great interest. "Hey, there are not only wolves that can be hunted here, but also a saber-toothed tiger." "Invite you too, Victor." Marcus looked at Victor and said dumbfounded, then he asked again, "Is it convenient for you too?" Logan took out a tissue and wiped his mouth, nodded and said, "I can." Victor's alcohol seemed to have gone away, and he squinted his eyes and smiled. "I want to see what this is. How dare you break into the tiger's territory to steal the sheep?" After saying that, he stuffed the sandwich into his mouth in a few bites, not looking forward to taking a look. Later, Marcus and John take Logan and Victor to the sheepfold. Klaus, who was still eating, kept staring at Logan's back, hesitated to speak, and finally murmured in surprise, "Did you notice that Logan seems to have become younger? I remember the first time I saw him. When he arrived, he was an old man in his 40s or 50s, but now he feels only a few years older than me, and I can hardly recognize him." Lorna on the side also felt the same and said, "He has indeed become a lot younger. Is he wearing makeup?" After saying that, she looked at Caliban and Charles in confusion. Caliban raised his head, hesitating and not knowing how to explain. Charles, on the other hand, was very calm and said with a smile, "Don't pay too much attention to it. This is a normal phenomenon for Logan. His self-healing factor will recover every once in a while, changing his appearance and restoring his strength. This is normal. We are all used to this phenomenon." Charles explained to the two of them very calmly, trying to make Logan's changes look normal so as not to make others suspicious. How amazing! After hearing this, Klaus didn't have the slightest doubt. He looked at Logan seriously, his eyes shining, and he seemed to be very interested in Logan's abilities. Lorna on the side also nodded. "This is simply unheard of. This ability is really strange." Charles and Caliban looked at each other and smiled silently. At the same time, Logan and the others were walking on their way to the sheepfold. Logan couldn't help but ask, "Generally, wild animals will leave some clues when hunting. Are there no clues in the sheepfold? Marcus in front shook his head. We found no signs of struggle, no blood or wreckage. We also searched nearby and found no wolf fur or anything like that, and the sheepfold was not damaged. It seems like it was done by a large animal. It grabbed the sheep in the sheepfold without giving any sign of struggle. Victor touched his chin and gave his guess, and then couldn't help but mutter to himself, "It's just that I don't think there are any traces of large animals around here." Logan nodded and asked curiously, "Have you seen any large animals nearby?" Marcos shook his head decisively, "I haven't seen it before, and if it is a large animal, we will definitely be able to find their footprints or other traces, but we haven't seen anything yet." These words made Logan couldn't help but frown for a moment. It seemed that there were very few clues. Soon, the four of them walked into a small forest. The sheepfold was hidden in the woods by Marcus and the others. Except for grazing on weekdays, they would be kept here. As soon as he got close to the sheepfold, Logan could clearly smell a strong smell of sheep, but there was no hear the cry of sheep. Everyone pushed open the door of the sheepfold, which was covered with hay, but now there was only hay and not a single sheep could be seen. "Where's the sheep?" Victor couldn't help but ask, but he didn't see half a sheep in the sheepfold. "They are free range outside." Marcos pointed outside. "Sheep need to be grazed. If they are stuck in the sheep pen, they will stop eating grass." Logan nodded and looked carefully in the sheepfold. Marcos followed and said, "This is the fourth sheepfold. One was just lost last night. With this one, there are already 3 sheep missing in the sheepfold. For the shelter, this is a huge loss. The shelter itself relies on the farm to make money, and the price of 3 sheep is indeed a considerable loss." Then, he walked to the door frame and said, "There are no signs of damage to the door, and no footprints were found nearby. We don't know what the problem is." Logan nodded. After checking around, he found nothing. The entire sheepfold was intact and there were no clues at all. Is it possible that the sheep never entered the sheepfold? Victor couldn't help but ask. After all, the protection of this sheepfold was quite large, and ordinary wild animals could not come in to hunt. Impossible. Marcos rejected the idea and added, "Our shepherd dogs are very competent and will not let any sheep stay outside overnight, and there are also dedicated people here who are responsible for counting the sheep every day after they are turned around." Logan couldn't help but frown as he listened to the conversation between the two. At this time, he noticed a window about 3 meters high on the wall of the sheepfold. He pointed at the window and asked, "Could a wild beast crawl in through the window and steal the sheep?" Victor rolled his eyes at him. "Logan, you are thinking too much. The window is 3 meters above the ground. What kind of beast can crawl in? Even if it can crawl in, how can it crawl out with a sheep in its mouth?" Logan shook his head in silence, looked around, found a ladder and climbed up. As soon as he climbed to the window, he could clearly see several clear claw marks on the frame of the window, and the claw marks were very clear and seemed to have appeared not long ago. Logan immediately said to John and the others, "Here, there are claw marks here. Come and take a look." After saying that, he walked down the ladder and asked several people to come up to check. When Marcos and others heard the clue, they quickly climbed up the ladder and carefully looked at the claw marks on the window frame. John even took a photo and let several people carefully identify it. "What kind of beast's claw is this?" To be honest, the marks on the window frame felt very strange to a few people, and they did not look like marks of beasts at all. "I feel like this is more like the traces left by people." Logan put his finger in front of the screen, compared the claw marks, and couldn't help mumbling to himself. As soon as these words came out, several people instantly understood that this was not poaching by wild animals at all, but man-made sheep theft. "Damn it, I didn't expect this to be done by someone. Damn it, this is the common property of the shelter, and someone dared to steal it." Marcus looked angry. After all, 3 sheep were missing. For them, the loss was not small. The same goes for John on the other side, with an angry look on his face. "We must catch this sheep thief." Logan did not participate in their anger, but just wondered, who steals a sheep and can't make a fuss? And doesn't leave any traces? If a strange face breaks into the flock, the sheep will definitely bark, which will not only surprise the vigilance of the sheepdog, but also attract the attention of the person standing guard. But judging from what Marcus and the others said, it seemed that there had been nothing unusual in the sheepfold recently. Marcus and John ignored Logan's guess, but clenched their fists and said seriously, "No matter who it is, we must catch him." John also nodded heavily. "We will stay here tonight and we must catch this thief. It's boring, I thought it was some kind of beast." After finding out that he was a man, Victor looked bored. He had no interest in the sheep thief. On the other hand, Logan said with great interest, "Don't you think this is more interesting than the sheep thief? He can actually take a sheep weighing several hundred kilograms away from a wall several meters high without leaving anything behind. Any trace." Logan looked at the 3 wooden high wall. It was impossible for ordinary people to climb over the wall with bare hands, carrying something weighing several hundred kilograms in one hand, without leaving any clues. Probably some horny guy on the farm. Victor shrugged indifferently. What normal people can't do, the mutants on the farm can do. After all, some people are very powerful. Moreover, although the food on the farm is filling, it is not rich. Maybe someone is greedy and starts poaching. Then he wouldn't steal 3 in a row, unless he has a big appetite. Logan smiled and dismissed the idea. Marcus on the other side was still very angry. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth and said, "No matter who it is, Victor and I will find him out tonight. We can't let him go so easily." Logan smiled and said, "If I weren't still busy, I would really like to stay here with you." Although he didn't have a mission, he didn't have time either. Those children still had to wait for him to teach them fighting skills. "You go to class first, we can just stay here." Marcus also knew that both Logan and Victor had the task of teaching, so he immediately asked them to leave first, while he and John were looking for some hidden place nearby to catch the sheep thief. Logan and Victor smiled, said goodbye to them, and went to the classroom to teach. He has a lot of classes planned today, both in the morning and afternoon. However, the children were very serious and studied very hard, which made Logan and Victor more relaxed. It was not until the evening that their teaching task was finished. When they left the classroom, it was time for dinner in the canteen. However, during the meal, Logan did not see Marcos and John. Lorna quietly told him that the two had gone to catch the sheep thief, and asked Lorna to bring them compressed biscuits and water later. Lorna spoke in a low voice. After all, it was not ruled out that the sheep thief was someone from the farm. Victor thought they were making a fuss. It was just a few sheep, but Lorna said seriously that the farm was in a very tight situation at the moment, and any sheep would be a huge loss, let alone 3. It was because Maka was not here today. Otherwise, if he knew that the sheep was lost, Marcos would be in trouble. After all, this could involve the problem of poor patrol. Logan just smiled, and at this moment, he suddenly heard a sheep screaming from the direction of the sheepfold. Hearing the sound, Logan's expression changed. He guessed that the sheep thief had been caught. He quickly stood up and rushed out of the cafeteria, running towards the sheepfold. Lorna and the others also noticed the sheep's cry, and they didn't care about dinner and hurriedly followed. Even Victor, who seemed to be indifferent, actually ran out. After running a few steps, they noticed that the sheep were running around, screaming in fear, and there were a lot of bright red blood on their white wool. Chapter 92, Vampire Legend, Strange Man in the Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sheep fled in panic, their bleating sounds were endless, and the blood on the white wool kept dripping. "Damn it, we can't let these sheep get away," Lorna frowned. These sheep were important assets of the shelter. If they all ran away, it would be a heavy loss for the shelter. "That's what's coming." Logan looked at the running sheep, frowning at the blood stains on the wool. The amount of bleeding on these wools was abnormal, and the sheep thief did not look like an ordinary creature. Marcus and John are still in the sheepfold. Lorna suddenly thought of the 2 people in the sheepfold and instantly became nervous. After Logan pondered for a while, he said to Klaus, "You and the others go to herd the sheep. Lorna and I will go to the sheepfold to see what's going on." After saying that, he ran towards the sheepfold, and Lorna and Victor quickly followed behind him. As soon as they got close to the sheepfold, the 3 of them saw Marcus and John walking out cursing, with a lot of blood on their bodies, but it didn't look like their blood. "How's it going? Did you catch that guy? Lorna stepped forward anxiously and asked. Logan and Victor rushed into the sheepfold to check the situation. At this time, the sheepfold was in a mess, the hay on the ground was messed up, and there was a lot of blood on it. A lamb lay motionless on the ground, with a huge gash in its belly. The white wool was covered with bright red blood, its internal organs were scattered all over the floor, and a strong smell of blood permeated it. Damn it, let that guy get away and kill a sheep. While wiping the blood on his body, Marcus looked at the dead sheep in the sheepfold with a look of regret, including the previous 3, this is already the 4th sheep. The loss is really too great. What exactly is going on? Logan leaned down to check on the lamb, his brows furrowed, and what he saw made him feel that things were not that simple. John and I were hiding in a nearby tree to observe, but suddenly we saw a person approaching quickly, and in a few seconds he climbed up the window of the sheepfold and got in. Marcus pointed to the window of the sheepfold, and then continued, after John and I met, we ran down quickly and rushed into the sheepfold to catch the guy. But when the guy saw us coming, he immediately panicked. But instead of running away immediately, he killed the sheep and tried to escape with the sheep's body. Marcus said helplessly. John and I hurriedly stopped him, but the guy was not weak. After a fight, we finally just kept the sheep, and the guy escaped through the window. Logan listened to their stories, his brows knitted together. Did you see who it was? Not from our shelter. John spoke quickly, and at the same time said, but he is not a normal person. That guy is a weirdo. He has sharp teeth, great strength, and very flexible speed. Both of them are mutants and have very good strength, but they can't have any upper hand against this weirdo. Did other mutants break in here? Victor turned to look at them and asked. After all, he was able to escape from the roundup of 2 mutants. Victor believed that they must be mutants. However, Marcus shook his head and said with certainty, it can't be a mutant. If there are traces of mutants around here, it's impossible to hide it from us. They patrol around the farm every day, and if there are unknown mutants around, they should have found them by now. While they were talking, Logan kept squatting on the ground and carefully looking at the lamb's body. While shaking the sheep's neck, he suddenly noticed a bite mark on the neck. The 4 teeth marks were very clear, and they all bit down exactly on the blood vessels. Logan carefully touched the bite mark, always feeling that the tooth sound was very familiar. After thinking about it carefully, he remembered that the teeth marks were similar to the bite marks of a vampire. Thinking of vampires, Logan couldn't help but frown and fell into deep thought. Victor, who was behind, saw that Logan seemed to have found some clues, and hurriedly squatted beside him and asked, what did you find? Look at this. Logan pointed to the location of the bite mark. Does this bite mark look familiar? As soon as these words came out, John and others also gathered around. Lorna looked at the bite marks, pondered for a while and then said, it looks like a poisonous snake. John objected, it is impossible for a poisonous snake to bite 4 holes. Maybe 2 venomous snakes. Marcos added again, listening to their conversation. Logan was silent for a while and then murmured, no, it's a vampire. Then he added, the vampire's fangs are very sharp, and the shape of the bite is also like this, and the bite is right on the blood vessel. I guess he may want to suck blood. This is impossible. John immediately retorted, Logan, there can't be vampires in this world. Those are all made-up things in the movie. In his opinion, vampires and the like are completely products of human imagination and can never exist. Logan looked at him, shook his head and smiled, even if we exist, what's so strange about vampires? In the eyes of many normal humans who have never come into contact with mutants, they will not believe that there are mutants in this world who possess superpowers and appear due to genetic mutations. The same is true for vampires. The reason why they do not believe it is just haven't been in contact with it. And Logan knows very well that vampires do exist in the Marvel Universe, and those vampires are quite active and very powerful. Logan exhaled helplessly and murmured, but if it is really a vampire, we will be in trouble. The existence of vampires is not a good thing for us. Those things have never been good things. Now they are just hunting sheep. Okay, but no one can be sure they will keep hunting sheep. Vampires are cruel and bloodthirsty, and human blood is a rare delicacy in their eyes. If they continue to be left alone, Logan is worried that the next one to be attacked will be other mutants in the sanctuary. Now they are already struggling to deal with the government. If tough guys like vampires come again, the trouble will be too big, but obviously, John and the others still didn't want to believe in the existence of vampires, and looked at Logan with suspicion. After all, vampires were a fantasy to them, but Lorna seemed to gradually accept Logan's statement. She remembered what she had talked about with the staff in the surrounding farms before, and said to everyone, "I heard that the farms next door also encountered these things from time to time. The livestock they raise often disappear mysteriously. Isn't it all caused by vampires, that if they are really vampires, they have been living nearby for a long time? Do you really believe in the existence of vampires?" John looked at Lorna in surprise. He still felt that vampires and other creatures were impossible to exist. Logan didn't want to argue with them. He stood up and looked at the window of the sheep pen. After thinking for a while, he said, "You report this matter to Mika first and organize others to get all the sheep back. Me and Victor goes to track that guy, he shouldn't be far away yet." "Okay." Marcos nodded and warned, "Please pay attention to safety and keep communicating." Logan nodded and took Victor to the window outside the sheepfold, and sure enough he found a pair of clear footprints. Obviously, this time the sheep thief was rounded up by John and the others, and he was very embarrassed when he escaped, leaving many clues behind. Victor squatted on the ground and looked at the huge footprints, and said solemnly, "These footprints don't look like normal human beings at first glance." After speaking, he sniffed the air around him and said solemnly, "And the smell of blood here is very strong, and the hostility is very strong. It feels difficult to deal with." Logan nodded, looked at the footprints on the ground, and followed the footprints to roughly determine the direction in which the vampire fled. Victor also followed Logan's gaze and said angrily, "I didn't expect that in the 21st century, those dirty vampires are still alive. Rumors of vampires existed a long time ago. When they were participating in the war, they heard legends of vampires from time to time, but they had never encountered them. However, a lot of evidence at the time could prove that vampires existed, but the number was relatively small. Rare, and Victor didn't expect that after so many years, those guys were not extinct. Let's go, follow the tracks and look for him. Maybe we can catch that guy before nightfall." Logan looked at the direction of the footprints, then looked at the setting sun that was about to fall into the mountain col, and began to run towards the direction of the footprints. Victor followed him. After walking along the footprints, the two ran outside the farm and ran into a forest. But as soon as they entered the forest, the footprints suddenly disappeared. There was no trace on the ground in front of them. The footprints stopped abruptly here. "Damn, those guys can still fly." Victor looked at the disappearing footprints on the ground and couldn't help but look up at the lush woods around him. All he could think about was that the guy flew away. "What now?" Victor turned his head and looked at Logan. Without clues, it would be difficult for them to track the guy's location. "Fine." Logan sniffed the air around him and said with a smile, "That guy can't hide his aura." Victor was stunned for a moment, then he raised his nose and sniffed, and then said in astonishment, "Why don't I smell anything?" Logan ignored him, but relied on his nose to keep looking for the direction in which the guy was escaping. He could clearly feel that there was still a subtle smell of blood in the air. The smell was so microwave that ordinary people couldn't smell it at all. Even Victor, who was very sensitive to blood, couldn't detect the subtle smell of blood, but now Logan can. As his body returns to its peak state, his abilities in all aspects have not only been restored, but even improved, including the ability to smell. Logan raised his nose, followed the faint blood in the air, and continued walking forward. After walking for a while, he noticed that the smell was particularly strong near some of the surrounding trees, and he seemed to have stopped briefly in the trees. Logan looked carefully at the big tree, examining every detail, and found some footprints and indentations on the tree. "That guy can't fly, but he can jump very well. He can escape by swinging from a tree like a monkey." He pointed at the roots on the branches for analysis, and after thinking for a while, he continued to chase the clues. Eventually, Logan and Victor stopped on a hillside. Victor found bloody wool and the remains of some sheep on the ground. as well as different footprints on the ground. Victor sniffed around the wreckage, his expression suddenly solemn. The smell here is very messy. In addition to the smell of sheep blood, he also smelled several different smells, mixed together, very messy. Logan nodded, frowned and said, "There is more than one person's smell here, that guy has a companion." After that, Logan carefully checked the footprints near the wreckage. Although the footprints were very messy, they eventually split into two different paths, one on the left and the other on the right. "One on each side, you on the right, I'll go to the left." Victor pointed to the left, then stood up and chased to the left. Logan nodded, looked at the dense forest on the right, and took big steps to chase. However, just after walking 2 steps, Logan heard the sound of fighting behind him, and Victor's roar. Not good. Logan was startled and turned around and ran back. When he arrived, Logan saw Victor fighting with a burly figure. Unfortunately, the sun was setting, and the light in the forest was dim, so Logan couldn't see what the burly figure looked like. He could only see that it was a strange man who looked like a lion, with a thick mane around his neck, and very wide feet and strong strength. He was fighting Victor, and the two were like tigers and lions, constantly colliding in the jungle, punching each other, and the dull sound kept echoing around. Seeing this, Logan hurried to help, but Victor suddenly said, "Don't come over, this damn thing dared to sneak attack me, I must kill him." It can be seen that Victor is very irritable now, and he insisted on solving the guy himself and never let Logan intervene. This guy. Seeing this, Logan had no choice but to stop where he was and carefully watch the battle. At the same time, Victor and the strange man were already fighting hard. Victor's powerful body looked like a ferocious beast at this moment, and his low roar was like the low roar of a vicious tiger, which made the surrounding birds flee. The weirdo was obviously unwilling to lag behind, and the mane on his neck stood up, looking like steel needles, and his eyes were full of anger. Victor rushed towards the weirdo, his sharp claws extended out, flashing a sharp cold light, and swung at the weirdo without any hesitation. The weirdo on the other side, although his body was very large, was extremely agile. With just a slight backward dodge, Victor's claws fell into the air. At the same time, his 2 arms clenched into fists, his strong muscles bulged high, and a terrifying force burst out, smashing towards Victor without hesitation. The huge fist looked like a huge iron fist, cutting through the air with a fierce wind. Victor's eyes condensed, but he was not afraid at all, and raised his arms and crossed them in front of him. Bang! The fist hit Victor's arm. The strong force made Victor's face change. He groaned in his throat and felt a clear pain in his arm. He felt that he was only 1 step away from a fracture. However, Victor's fighting skills were naturally not inferior. He was not frightened by this force. Instead, he subconsciously raised his foot and kicked hard. Seeing this, the weirdo quickly retracted his fist and retreated quickly. The two stared at each other, and the next moment they rushed out again. The 2 figures approached quickly in the woods and finally collided with each other. The 2 sides quickly launched a fierce close combat, with fists against each other, and feet against feet. For a while, they were inseparable. Victor relied on his ferocity and animality, and every move was full of deadly threats. The weirdo was not inferior either. He attacked desperately like a beast. After a while, many clear scratches appeared on the clothes of both sides, and blood kept dripping from the scratches, but neither of them stopped attacking because of the pain. The dull sound of collisions echoed in the jungle, and the fight was extremely fierce. A few minutes later, Victor suddenly found a gap in the opponent's punch and dodged the fierce fist. At the same time, he bent down and hit the monster's abdomen with a heavy claw. Roar! The pain in his abdomen made the monster roar and staggered back 2 steps. Victor refused to let go and rushed forward again, punching like raindrops. Facing this fierce attack, the monster's expression gradually became more and more solemn, and finally it was difficult to resist. Boom! Victor's punch successfully hit the monster's chest. The strong force made the monster retreat dozens of steps. He covered his painful chest and stared at Victor fiercely. His eyes were full of fear. Finally, he gritted his teeth and turned around before Victor continued to pounce on him, and quickly rushed into the woods beside him. The huge figure disappeared in the dense forest in an instant. Victor, who had won the victory, saw the weirdo was about to run away, and his previous complacency disappeared instantly. Instead, his expression suddenly changed, and he roared, "Damn it, you guy, don't even think about running." As he said that, he also raised his steps and quickly chased after the weirdo. Logan looked at Victor's figure, his expression was distorted, and he shouted loudly, "Damn it, Victor, don't be impulsive, be careful of an ambush." There were many footprints on the ground just now. Obviously there was more than one weirdo, and maybe there were many of his accomplices in the forest, but how could Victor, who was in a high position, listen to Logan's advice? He sprinted at a very fast speed in the direction where the weirdo fled. "Damn it!" Logan looked at Victor's back, gritted his teeth, and could only chase after him quickly, but when he set out, he paid special attention to the footprints left by the monster, the huge footprints. The width of a single foot is thicker than the 2 feet of a normal person, and the depth of the downward pressure also shows that the monster's body is very heavy, but even such a heavy person is very fast, and it only takes a moment to completely disappear in the dense forest. Logan looked at the footprints and recalled the body shape of the monster, which completely matched the figure of the monster. Chapter 93, Beasts in the Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this time, the sun had completely dissipated, the moon rose in the sky, and the stars were twinkling. The night was as dark as ink, and the forest was pitch black. However, the forest tonight was not peaceful. A burly figure, like a cheetah, was rushing in front. He seemed to be very familiar with the dense forest. He could easily avoid the trees in front and move in the complex jungle. His speed was like a shadow, raising gusts of wind and frightening the fallen leaves, and behind, 2 figures were chasing like wolves. Although the 2 were not familiar with the dense forest, their eyes under the dark night reflected green fluorescence like wolves. The scene in the jungle could be seen clearly. Every time their heavy footsteps stepped on the ground, they could shake the fallen leaves around and splash the mud. "Boy, if you have the guts, stop, let's fight to the death." Victor chased all the way, his face flushed, and he kept panting, but he could not catch up with the figure of the weirdo, and his physical strength was gradually exhausted. As he got older, his body's endurance was not as good as before. After chasing for so long, he couldn't stand it anymore. This guy's speed. Logan, who was standing by, was fine. He didn't blush or breathe heavily, but he was secretly surprised by the speed of the weirdo. This weirdo looked very bulky, and it should be difficult for him to move in the forest with his huge body. He thought he could catch up with him easily, but after chasing for a long time, he found that things were not as they thought. This weirdo was not only familiar with the jungle, but also had an amazing speed. Even though he and Victor were good at chasing, it was difficult for them to catch up for a while. Just as Logan was thinking, the bushes in the side of the bushes suddenly trembled. "No!" Logan exclaimed, his expression suddenly changed. At the same time, 2 tall and mighty figures suddenly jumped out of the woods. The huge body was just like a wild man in the jungle, flying towards Logan and his friends quickly. Logan's expression shrank, and he reacted quickly. He immediately grabbed Victor's arm and rolled to the side to avoid the attack of the 2 figures. Bang! The 2 figures hit the tree heavily, and the heavy force instantly cracked the trunk. Crack! The trunk made a crisp cracking sound, and the half-man-thick tree fell down with a bang, stirring up a large amount of dust. The wind blew up other trees in the forest and the leaves flew everywhere. "Damn, 2 more." Logan got up from the ground and looked at the 2 weirdos in front of him with vigilance. Although it was night and the light was very dim, Logan could still clearly see that the 2 people were exactly the same size as the previous weirdo, with a thick mane around their necks. The lush hair made Logan unable to see their faces clearly. After the 2 weirdos appeared, the weirdo who had escaped before seemed to have someone to support him, so he turned back. "Fuck, you coward!" Victor stared at the weirdo who had returned, snorted coldly, and kept moving his limbs. His muscles bulged high, and his bones creaked, as if he was going to have another good fight with the weirdo. However, the weirdo just glanced at Victor, and then strode back to his 2 companions. The 3 weirdos stood together, and their sturdy bodies looked like a wall. Logan and Victor were already strong, but now compared with them, they looked much thinner. The 2 weirdos who had just appeared looked up and down at Logan and Victor, and the one standing in the middle suddenly snorted. "The people of Maka Farm, are you really going to chase them for such a small matter?" His voice was very rough, as if it was the low roar of a beast. and it was very intimidating in the jungle at night. "Can you talk?" Logan was a little surprised. He once thought these guys were savages. After a little surprise, Logan looked at the three weirdos and said in a deep voice, "Your partner stole 3 of our sheep and killed one in the sheepfold. This is a big loss for us. We can't let us suffer in vain. I apologize to you for his behavior." The weirdo standing in the middle obviously didn't want the conflict to escalate. Although his voice was low, his attitude was very sincere. "We will return it to you in the future, I promise." However, as soon as his voice fell, the weirdo who was chased first said with resentment, "No, I can't compensate Maka for anything. That hypocritical guy is a complete villain," he roared at Logan, with a fierce light in his eyes, as if he was full of hatred for the name Maka. "Roar!" After saying that, he rushed towards Logan with a roar, regardless of his companion's obstruction. Whirl! He raised his huge arm high and smashed it towards Logan without hesitation. The whistling fist was like a swinging pendulum. Logan's expression froze, and he hurriedly raised his arms to block. Bang! A dull collision sound instantly rang out in the dense forest. Logan was knocked back several steps by the strong force, and his arms were numb from the shock. However, it was this close contact that allowed him to see the appearance of the weirdo clearly. The guy was like a hybrid of a human and a beast, with ferocious fangs in his mouth, eyes like the eyes of a lion, but with a human look in his eyes, and terrifying fangs in his mouth, and his skin was a little blue. Looking at the appearance of this weirdo, Logan frowned. This weirdo gave him a very familiar feeling, as if he had seen him somewhere before, or had seen a similar creature, but what reassured Logan was that this guy was definitely not a vampire. Vampires are not so big, and they would not do things so rudely. Although those guys are full of threats, they are more like a group of dangerous dukes. The other party's attitude was also very clear. At least the weirdo in the middle did not want the conflict to escalate, which meant that there was still room for negotiation, but Logan did not understand what the weirdo they chased at the beginning meant. He seemed to have a lot of resentment towards Maka. In Logan's impression, Maka treated everyone very well and was a very rational person, but why did this guy have such deep malice towards him? What was the relationship? While Logan was thinking, a roar came from the front again. The weirdo who attacked him smashed his fist again in anger. Logan shook his head to get rid of his inner thoughts, and quickly dodged sideways. The weirdo's fist fell into the air. Seeing this, Logan kicked hard and hit the weirdo's abdomen hard. Bang! A dull sound rang out, and the huge force made the monster hold his stomach and retreat repeatedly. A look of pain appeared on his face, and he cast a surprised look at Logan. He didn't expect Logan's strength to be so strong. After recovering a little, the monster rushed up again, and his huge body seemed very flexible. The strong force could easily break the surrounding trees, and every punch was whistling, but after a fight, it was obvious that Logan was stronger, relying on superb fighting skills and absolute crushing in strength. After a fight, the monster didn't touch Logan at all, but was beaten back repeatedly in Logan's counterattacks. Very embarrassed, in the end, Logan seized a flaw, grabbed the monster's waving arm, and took a step forward, with his shoulder against the monster's chest, pressing his hands down, and his shoulders up, directly performing a perfect shoulder throw to the monster. Bang! Under the tyrannical force, the weirdo was like a sandbag, and was pushed out by Logan, hitting a big tree nearby. The sound of the tree trunk cracking was heard, the branches kept shaking, and the leaves fell one after another. Roar! The severe pain in his body made the weirdo roar, and he endured the pain in his body and struggled to climb up from the tree. He stared at Logan with cold eyes, and seemed very unconvinced, and rushed up again with gritted teeth, but the end was obviously the same as before. He was played by Logan, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't touch Logan at all. "Hans, you are too reckless." The other two weirdos saw this and scolded the weirdo. They could clearly see that the gap between the strength of the weirdo and Logan was simply a world of difference, and there was no comparison, but they couldn't watch their companions being bullied like this. After looking at each other, they sighed helplessly and flashed out immediately, wanting to help their companions. However, before they took a few steps, a figure suddenly flashed out. "Hey, you are not the only ones with you. Victor opened his hand and blocked the way of the two weirdos. The two weirdos looked at each other and nodded to each other. One of the weirdos rushed towards Victor without hesitation, and his huge fist hit Victor without hesitation. Seeing this, Victor also stretched out his tiger claws and instantly tangled with him. The two were instantly in a stalemate, with speed and strength being equal. Victor slashed with a claw, and the weirdo quickly leaned back and raised his huge paw to counterattack. Victor had to retract his tiger claws and dodge sideways. Victor could clearly feel that this weirdo's fighting skills were obviously much more savvy than before. In addition to his reckless killing moves, his reaction speed was also obviously much stronger. Either he had undergone formal combat training, or he often fought with others. In short, he was more difficult to deal with than the previous one. During the fight, the two gradually stopped holding back, and used all their killing moves. Although it was not beautiful, any flaw was enough to be fatal. The two's expressions gradually became solemn. During the fight, they hit the surrounding trees from time to time. The trunks were instantly shaken and the leaves were scattered. The birds at night did not dare to stop in this area at all, and they flapped their wings and fled quickly. Some smaller trees could not even withstand the casual blows of the two. They fell heavily to the ground with a click, and the trunks were torn apart, with bursts of rumbling sounds. While they were fighting, another weirdo quickly rushed to his companion and followed the original weirdo to fight Logan. This man's fighting quality was not bad, and he had a very high degree of cooperation with the weirdo. The two weirdos punched and kicked each other, and they fought Logan hard. However, Logan's fighting ability was not exaggerated. Relying on his sharp speed and strong strength, coupled with advanced fighting skills, he could handle it easily even when facing the front and back attacks of the two weirdos. While dodging punches and kicks, he could also fight back powerfully, and he had a certain advantage. Damn, this guy is not simple. But after being knocked away, a weirdo stared at Logan and gasped. He could see that Logan's fighting ability was much stronger than any of them. If it weren't for the fact that both of them had good strength and speed, they would not be Logan's opponents at all. Thinking of this, he looked at the equally tense battle situation on the other side, and frowned for a moment. If they don't solve it quickly, the danger will be too great if they continue to fight like this. At this time, the weirdo saw his companion being beaten back by Logan and had no time to look behind him. The weirdo's expression changed, and he turned around and climbed up a big tree nearby. The huge body seemed extremely flexible at this moment, and he climbed to the top of the tree in a few moments, hiding in a bush, staring at Logan through the leaves, waiting for the opportunity. Seeing Logan forcing his companion behind a big tree and beating him continuously, the strange man suddenly jumped down from the tree, as fast as a flying lion. Here, Logan was concentrating on crushing the weirdo in front of him. Suddenly he noticed the movement behind him. He looked back slightly and saw a huge figure flying down from the tree. The rapid speed made Logan's pupils shrink and he took a step forward. Tear. With this step, he avoided the strange body, but his back was accidentally cut open by the strange sharp claws. A huge hole was instantly cut in his clothes, followed by the muscles in his back. The majestic muscles were scratched open by the claws, and they were even close to the spine. Mtlnove's vertebrae were very clear at this moment, and blood spurted out violently. Although the weirdo couldn't suppress Logan, he was overjoyed when he saw the wound, and when he was about to move forward excitedly to continue the attack, a scene that shocked him appeared. The huge wound healed quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye. The open muscles contracted rapidly and joined together. The blood was instantly stopped. In less than 3 seconds, the fatal injury was restored to its original state. If it weren't for the indeed torn clothes, the weirdo wouldn't even think he had hit Logan just now. For a moment, the weirdo was completely confused. How is it possible? That he roared in fear. How could a person have such a terrifying ability to recover? At this moment, he looked at Logan with fear in his eyes, and was completely stunned for a moment. As for Logan, whose back was attacked, his eyes instantly turned cold and he turned around sharply. Click. His fists were clenched tightly, and steel claws shot out from between his finger bones. The bright silver steel claws shone with a cold light in the night. He had not used steel claws in previous battles. After all, Wolverine's reputation was too great. Once he used steel claws, being recognized by these weirdos would pose a threat to the sanctuary. After all, the current defense capabilities of the shelter are still very weak. If there is a large organization behind these weirdos, including his former enemies, it will be troublesome if they call for attack on the shelter, so he didn't want to expose the steel claws at first, and fists alone were enough to deal with these guys. Moreover, the crime these people committed was just stealing sheep. One of the weirdos admitted his mistake very politely. Logan believed that there was no need to have any murderous intention towards them. This is not World War II or a laboratory where unnecessary killing can be avoided, but now, the physical pain instantly made Logan unable to help but become furious, raising his sharp steel claws high. When the weirdo saw this, he looked up at the steel claw in disbelief, feeling a little dazed for a moment. He could clearly feel the coldness coming from the steel claws. Whoops. Logan's eyes were slashed hard and cold, the cold light flashing. When the weirdo saw this, his pupils shrank sharply. He took a step back in fright, and at the same time raised his arms to block. Click. The sharp steel claws slashed past, and the beast-like arms were cut off instantly. The huge palms flew in the air and landed with a bang. Aw! Blood spurted out from the weirdo's arm, and scarlet blood sprinkled on the surrounding grass. The pain caused him to hold the severed limb tightly with his other hand, and he stepped back with a pale face, fear in his eyes. Seeing this, Luo and the weirdo behind him also became stunned. Their skin is very flexible and difficult to cut with knives, and their bones are extremely hard. But when faced with this guy's steel claws, it turned out to be as fragile as tofu. For a moment, this weirdo's scalp went numb, and he realized that Logan had been holding back his hands before, otherwise he would have died under the steel claws. After thinking about this, the weirdo's face also turned pale. After looking at Logan in fear, he didn't dare to resist at all, and stood up suddenly to help his companion. "He's injured, run!" that the weirdo yelled at the weirdo who was fighting fiercely with Victor, and quickly helped his companions to hide in the jungle. The weirdo who was fighting fiercely with Victor on the other side heard the sound and looked back. After seeing the severed arm, he panicked for a moment. After kicking Victor away, he quickly ran away deep into the woods. "Still want to escape?" Victor, who had been hit on the head, saw that the other party was about to run away. He gritted his teeth and chased them in the direction they left. He shouted loudly, "Coward, stop and continue if you dare." But those weirdos obviously would not be intimidated by such a simple provocation, and continued to run away crazily without looking back. Victor obviously wanted to continue chasing, but was stopped by Logan. He looked at the severed limbs on the ground, thought deeply, and said to Victor, "Stop chasing. We are not familiar with the terrain here, and it is easy for them to get lost." After a pause, Logan added, "And we're not sure if they have any more ambush." Logan looked at the quiet jungle. He wasn't sure that there were only 3 of these weirdos in total. Maybe there were still more in the jungle. If they were surrounded, he and Victor would be in trouble. "Just let them escape like this?" Victor was obviously not convinced, and looked fiercely at the direction where the monster fled. Logan did not respond, glanced at the broken limbs on the ground, and then looked up at the direction where the monster fled. He could vaguely see the monster looking back to see if they were chasing. And in the moonlight, Logan happened to see that the monster's skin was blue. This blue skin and image always gave him a familiar feeling. It seemed like a beast. Chapter 94 Professor X loses control. Mental flood kills the professor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Under the night, Logan and Victor slowly returned to the farm. At this time, the sheep had been driven back to the sheepfold with the efforts of everyone, and people were arranged to guard nearby to prevent the appearance of sheep thieves. "How is the situation?" "No one was injured. Did you catch that guy?" In the farm, Marcos saw the 2 people coming back and hurried to meet them. After solving the problem of the sheep fleeing, he and Luna and others waited here. They wanted to go out of the farm to support, but they didn't know which direction to go, so they could only look forward to it. Now seeing that the 2 returned safely, they were relieved and hurried forward to ask. "It's okay." Logan shook his head to reassure the others, and then said helplessly, "Let the guy run away. He has companions to support him, and his combat effectiveness is not weak. In addition, the environment in the forest is complicated, so we can only give up tracking for the time being." "Is it really a vampire?" Lorna asked worriedly. "No." Logan shook his head again, and after thinking for a while, he didn't know how to explain. The situation is a bit complicated, and their identities cannot be determined at present. While speaking, he recalled the words of the weirdo, and then added, from the looks of it, those guys are like wild men, about 2 meters tall, can speak, and sound like they know Maka. Not only did those weirdos know that they were from Maka's village, but one of them seemed to have a grudge against Maka. Victor on the side also recalled what the weirdo said. After thinking for a while, he asked Marcos and others, has Maka offended anyone? That at least one of the 3 weirdos had had friction with Maka. Marcos and John thought about it and recalled their experience since they came into contact with Maka. After a while, Marcos said thoughtfully, as far as I know, apart from the patrol team, SHIELD, and some official organizations, he has not offended any people or groups. After all, he just wants to run the shelter and farm well. John also added, and this is obviously not an official act. If they knew we were here, they would not attack only a few sheep. Logan listened to their words, hesitant to speak, but after thinking for a while, he finally didn't say anything, just let out a sigh of helplessness, and said in a deep voice, the specific situation can only be discussed after Maka comes back. After speaking, he glanced at the sheepfold, turned to Marcos and said, you should arrange the sheepfold. Those weirdos should not come again in the short term. After this incident, the weirdos should not approach the farm again. Of course, proper precautions should also be taken. Don't worry. Marcos smiled and patted his chest, you are tired tonight, go back and rest quickly, leave the things here to us. Logan nodded, didn't waste any words, and went home with Victor. After a day of classes during the day and chasing monsters at night, they were really exhausted. When Logan returned home, he found that Laura was also there, sitting on the sofa with Caliban watching TV. When she saw Logan and the others coming back, the girl happily jumped off the sofa to greet them. Caliban smiled and explained, she heard that you were going to catch vampires, so she came here to wait for you out of curiosity. Logan nodded and touched Laura's head lovingly. Children of her age are very interested in some mysterious events. Is it a vampire? Laura raised her head curiously, and her 2 watery eyes looked at Logan curiously. Vampires, which others were afraid of, seemed to be something very novel and interesting in her eyes. No. Logan pulled him to the sofa and sat down, smiling and shaking his head. So, are they wild men? Lola sat next to him, still very curious. I heard them say that the guy who stole the sheep was like a wild man, covered in hair. Logan smiled and nodded, maybe, but we don't know, we didn't catch them. Are there many? She just heard that one rushed into the sheepfold to steal sheep, but now it seems that there is more than one. I met 3 in the woods. Logan didn't hide it, leaning on the sofa and rubbing the girl's head affectionately. Are they powerful? Lola still asked relentlessly. Logan looked down at her. It seems that after coming to the shelter, her personality has become much more cheerful. After interacting with the children more, she has become more talkative and no longer so wary of others. Not bad. Logan nodded, recognizing the abilities of those weirdos. At least in terms of fighting skills, strength and speed, they are better than many ordinary mutants. Did you win? Lola looked at Victor, then at Logan. Of course. Logan smiled, but they still ran away. After saying that, Logan looked around and asked, where is the professor? He's upstairs. Lola pointed to the 2nd floor and explained, the professor has a class tomorrow and needs to organize the courseware. Yeah. Logan nodded and said, you watch TV first. I need to talk to the professor about something. Lola nodded and looked back at the TV. Logan also stood up, walked to the professor's room, knocked on the door and entered. At this time, the professor was sitting at the desk, with the desk lamp next to him shining on the desk. He was wearing reading glasses and kept writing and drawing on the courseware on the desk. Since becoming a teacher in the shelter, preparing courseware for the children every day has become his job every night. Logan, is that you? Charles heard the voice coming from the door, took off his reading glasses, turned his head and looked at Logan. I heard them say you went to catch vampires. Did you catch them? No. Logan walked to the desk and sat down, shaking his head and said, and they are not vampires. Oh, Charles became interested. What is that, New Mutants? Not sure. Logan sighed helplessly. To be honest, I hope those guys are vampires, at least it won't be so troublesome. Vampires are not good things. If they are really vampires, he can kill them without any psychological burden, but obviously, those guys are not, and their image reminds Logan of an old friend. What happened? Charles saw that Logan seemed to be worried and looked at his eyes curiously. After a moment of silence, Logan said with a struggle, Professor, do you still remember Hank McCoy? The one in the academy before. Hearing this name, the professor was stunned. His memory seemed to be affected by this string of names. He fell into a trance for a while. After a long time, he came back to his senses and said with emotion, how could I forget? His code name is Beast, but in fact, under his fierce appearance, he hides very knowledgeable wisdom. If there was no accident in the academy, I believe he would become a very wise man. After a pause, Charles seemed to remember the past of Beast, and continued to say with a smile, his learning ability is amazing. I never dared to believe that he, a mutant who looks like a lion, can have such an efficient learning ability. The wisdom in his brain is enough to amaze any wise man. I really miss the time when I discussed with him in school. Logan nodded. He had contact with Beast in the academy before. That guy is indeed a mutant who is surprising, at least in terms of knowledge, he is admirable. Why did you mention him suddenly? The professor looked at Logan curiously, wondering why Logan suddenly mentioned this name after so many years. After a moment of silence, Logan asked carefully, Professor, do you know where Hank has been all these years? As soon as this was said, the smile on Charles's face froze instantly. Where did he go? He seemed to be trapped in deep memories, and the expression on his face became deeper and more ferocious, as if he was trapped in the past that he didn't want to recall in his life. His brows were tightly locked together, and a terrifying energy gradually spread in his mind. I don't know. Charles suddenly held his head with both hands. The tingling in his head made his scalp stand up with blue veins, and his palms kept slapping his head. I can't remember it clearly. It was too chaotic at the time. Everything was a mess. I don't know anything and I can't remember anything. Professor, wake up, if you can't remember us, don't think about it anymore. Looking at Charles's appearance, Logan suddenly panicked and wanted to step forward and pat the professor to wake him up from his memories, but before he could stand up, Charles's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened, covering his head. His azure blue eyes were in confusion at this moment, and his ferocious expression was like a drowning person struggling in the water. Buzz. A terrifying torrent suddenly broke out from the professor's head and continued to spread around. The whole house trembled instantly, and all the furniture and equipment could not stop trembling. Under the sky as black as thick ink, the invisible waves were like a rolling flood, constantly sweeping outward and covering the entire farm. Everything on the farm was shaking as if it had entered a stuck video. Everyone suddenly felt a harsh buzzing sound, as if it was going to pierce everyone's eardrums, like a wave, constantly washing the cochlea, stimulating the brain to keep buzzing. In such continuous pain, everyone wanted to cover their ears, but every muscle in their body was frozen, and their bodies could not make any movements. Even the muscles on their faces could not move, leaving only the deep fear from the bottom of their eyes that emerged from the deep heart. Even the air seemed to be completely frozen. The suffocating feeling of being unable to breathe, coupled with the buzzing pain in the head, made everyone feel the fear of dying. The whole farm seemed to be caught in a great disaster. Not good. Logan looked at the professor's appearance. He could not forget the feeling of pain all over his body. The strong impact made his head split. He knew that the professor had lost control again. Logan regretted why he mentioned the beast to the professor. Those memories of the past made the professor's calm heart fluctuate again, and he could not suppress it at all. Logan gritted his teeth, endured the severe pain, and staggered downstairs. The shaking house and the painful head made him hit the wall several times, and he almost fell down the stairs. He went downstairs with difficulty holding the handrail. When he passed the window, he saw that everyone outside was frozen in place. Under the strong suppression, everyone could not struggle, just like a shaking photo. with afterimages. Downstairs, Laura was kneeling on the ground in pain. Perhaps because of her self-healing factor, she still had some ability to resist the impact. Looking at Logan running downstairs, she had a face full of torment and covered her head. Wanting to ask him what happened, Caliban and Victor on the other side stood quietly, but their eyes were full of terror, and tears flowed from the corners of their eyes unconsciously. Looking at this scene, Logan could only grit his teeth and continue to look for tranquilizers. Only sedatives can calm the professor now, and this is also the scary thing about the professor. The impact on his brain not only makes people feel physical harm, but also reveals the most fragile side of people's hearts, making the unforgettable pain that can never be traced out. It plays out in the brain over and over again, hitting people's hearts directly. Even though Logan could stare at the high voltage at this time and could barely move, the past flashing in his mind, every scene, made that person heartbroken. If there is no tranquilizer to contain the impact, the professor's impact will continue to wash away the entire farm, and eventually everyone will die in pain. The entire farm will also be completely destroyed by this powerful impact, and more than 100 people will die in this incident. In the Great Catastrophe, to everyone, the out-of-control professor is like a huge bomb that lights the fuse. Unless the fuse can be pinched, the entire farm will be destroyed. Logan was glad that he was on the farm tonight and could find a tranquilizer for the professor, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. Finally, Logan found the sedative in the drawer, struggled to climb upstairs again, and resisted the strong resistance, inserted the sedative needle into the professor and injected the medicine. As the potion was injected, Charles gradually calmed down and the shock wave dissipated. Call. Logan let out a long sigh of relief and collapsed to the ground as if exhausted. Even for him, facing this shock wave going up and down the stairs almost exhausted all his physical energy. Charles, who was thankful to have come over, looked at Logan's appearance, and then realized that he had lost control. For a moment, his old face was full of fear, and he hid his face and said, "Sorry, Logan." He knew very well what would happen if he lost control. He was very afraid that he would commit another unforgivable sin. "Professor, it's not your fault." Logan stepped forward to comfort him and gently patted the professor on the shoulder. Charles suddenly raised his head and grabbed Logan's palm. "If there is a next time, please kill me, please. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to hurt innocent people, please." He looked at Logan almost pleadingly, and that look made Logan feel extremely distressed. "There won't be a next time, Professor. Don't worry, I will always protect you." Logan patted the professor on the shoulder and tried his best to comfort him, but Charles's eyes gradually blurred due to the onset of the drug's effects. "Logan, you must kill me if necessary, don't be soft, I will only bring disaster if I lose control." Before he finished speaking, Charles fell into a coma due to the sedative. Looking at the old professor, Logan felt an indescribable feeling of distress. He took him out of the wheelchair, laid him down on the bed, and covered him with a quilt. Looking at Charles, who was still frowning even in his sleep, Logan couldn't help but take a deep breath. Call. Looking back now, what happened back then was still a huge blow to the professor, and it will always be a trauma that cannot be erased in his heart, but this is understandable. After all, after the professor lost control, he personally killed his beloved students. Those students who were as close as family members died because of him. This has put all mutants in the current predicament. Over the years he had taken all the responsibility on himself and viewed death as relief. Logan sighed helplessly, turned off the lamp, rearranged the things scattered in the room, then closed the door and went downstairs. At this time, the living room was full of people. Marcus, John and others stood in the living room with panicked faces, watching him go downstairs. "Logan, what just happened?" Marcus spoke, and the impact just now made him feel like he was on the edge of death. Logan sighed helplessly. "The professor lost control. This is his old problem, but don't worry, it won't happen often. As long as you don't irritate him, he will usually be fine." After listening to Logan's words, everyone fell into silence, looking towards the second floor with a little fear. After all, the feeling just now was too terrifying. After a long silence, Marcus said, "Let someone stay by the professor's side from now on. If he attacks again and no one stops him in time, I'm worried that the entire asylum will." Although he didn't finish speaking, everyone understood what he meant. The professor's shock was so terrifying that no one wanted to experience the pain just now. Logan also understood what he meant. After all, the professor was a time bomb, and no one could guarantee that he would not be in a similar situation again. Don't worry. Logan nodded to everyone. I will let Caliban guard the professor with a sedative at all times. A similar situation will never happen again. Marcus and others nodded and said helplessly, please be more careful in the future. After saying that, Bien left with John and others. After seeing off a few people, Logan took a deep breath. He knew that the professor's situation could not happen again, otherwise they might be expelled for the safety of the farm. After all, compared to the morality of respecting the elderly and caring for the young, no one wanted to sleep together with a bomb that could kill someone. The professor is old. As the door closed, Caliban glanced upstairs and spoke with a worried look. Shut up. Logan scolded him. Logan, you can't deny this fact. The professor will not become younger because of your denial. He doesn't have many years to live. Caliban spoke to Logan seriously, and then added, the professor is not you. He can't be rejuvenated like you. Birth, aging, illness and death are the laws of nature. We can't change them. Listening to Caliban's words, Logan fell silent instantly. Caliban was telling the truth, and he also understood that the professor's age could not be changed, but, this is the Marvel Universe. Rejuvenation may not be possible, but extending life seems to be possible. Thinking of this, Logan couldn't help but sit on the sofa and think about it. The best thing to get now is the super soldier serum, S.H.I.L.D, and Hydra have been researching this thing for many years. Although they are all incomplete versions, after more than 10 years, one injection can be comparable to the effect of Captain America, but after the injection, it can indeed extend lifespan to a certain extent, and also strengthen the body. If the current professor is injected, maybe he can reverse his aging trend and even become younger. Thinking of this, Logan instantly became energetic. But the problem followed. It's just that the super soldier serum is very important to both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. It is a key project. How can we get it from them? Chapter 95, First Meeting with Tony Stark, and Seizing the Mind Scepter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Stark snatched the Soul Scepter, Shelter Farm, in Maka's office. How about it? I've been away for a few days. There's nothing unusual at the farm. Micah sat at his desk and looked at everyone in the office. Basically, all the backbone of the farm are here, including Logan, Victor, Marcus, John, etc., except for Caliban who has to accompany the professor in class. They are all summoned by Maka. He had been out for several days and finally returned to the farm. He had to understand the situation on the farm these days. However, after his words fell, no one responded immediately. After looking at each other for a while, Marcus finally said, something happened and 4 sheep were lost. 4 sheep? Micah was stunned and asked with a frown, what happened? Did you run away? Marcus was silent for a while, not knowing how to answer. Luo, he stood up and responded, no, it was stolen. He successfully stole 3 sheep. When he stole the 4th sheep, we discovered it, but he killed the sheep before leaving. Who is it? Micah was stunned. He couldn't figure out who would dare to sneak into a mutant farm and steal sheep, and he actually succeeded 3 times. Not sure. Logan shook his head. We couldn't catch him, but they were 3 weirdos, with blue skin and lion-like manes on their necks. They were very tall, with very strong strength and speed. They looked like savages, but they could. After talking, Victor and I chased them into the woods and fought with them, but they still escaped. After listening to Logan's words, Micah's eyes changed slightly, but he still frowned. Is there such a person around here? Victor on the side said, they should know you, at least one of them seems to have a problem with you. Oh. Micah was stunned for a moment, stared at Victor, and asked with a frown, what did he say? After thinking for a while, Victor responded, I didn't say anything. One of the weirdos was willing to compensate for our losses, but the weirdo who stole the sheep was unwilling. He also said that it was impossible to compensate you for anything, saying that you were a little kid. People and stuff like that. After hearing this, Micah frowned and thought for a long time, then shook his head. I don't remember, maybe it was because I had some festivals in the past. After all, in order to establish this farm, I will always provoke some enemies. Looking at Micah's expression, Logan always felt that something was wrong. The appearance characteristics of those weirdos are very obvious. If there is a past, it is impossible that they cannot remember it. Moreover, the attitude of one of the weirdos towards Micah clearly indicates that he was hurt by Micah in the past. Looking at Micah's appearance, Logan always felt that Micah was hiding something, but after thinking about it, Logan did not choose to pierce the window paper. After Micah thought to no avail, he stopped thinking about it and asked instead, apart from the 4 sheep, there are no other losses. Are any of our people injured? No. Marcos responded, except for this incident, everything else is normal. That's good. Micah waved his hand and said with a relaxed expression, as long as no one is injured, it will be fine. As for the sheep pen, I will arrange more guards to patrol behind it. You should also pay attention to it and be careful not to be attacked by strange people. The loss of 4 sheep was indeed significant for the shelter, but not to the point of irreparable loss. After a pause, Micah looked at everyone, and then said, I called you here today for one reason, to understand the situation in the shelter. In addition, there is another task that requires you to take action. What mission? When Victor heard about the mission, he immediately became interested. After all, he was bored out of his mind by spending all day huddled in the farm teaching children fighting skills. Go to a place, pick up something and come back. That thing is very important, so be sure to bring it back safely. After Micah finished speaking, his eyes locked on Logan. Logan, this matter is more important. You have rich experience in performing tasks outside. I wonder if you can complete this task as the team leader. Hey, my experience is no less than his. Victor looked unconvinced. You shouldn't keep focusing on Wolverine. Saber-toothed tiger's ability is not inferior to that of Wolverine. Micah smiled and turned to look at Victor. Victor, if you can get rid of your bad temper, I can consider letting you be the team leader, otherwise I'm worried that you will take my weapon with you as soon as you encounter the enemy. My friends charged blindly, causing me heavy losses. After hearing this, Victor became silent for a moment. Although he didn't want to admit it, he was indeed not as thoughtful as Logan. Logan thought for a moment and nodded, I can complete the task. Very good. Micah smiled and added, as for who you want to take with you, it's up to you. I will prepare fake passports, new ID cards, and air tickets for you. It will be ready tomorrow. You go this time. The place is a bit far, I hope you can be prepared. While speaking, Micah opened the drawer, took out a document and handed it to Logan. Logan opened the document bag. The mission location was a small country in the interior of Eastern Europe, called Sokovia. The content of the mission was to bring back a batch of goods from Sokovia. What kind of goods was it? Didn't say. Micah also said that he did not know the situation of the goods. This task was an order received from a broker. After all, the shelter required a lot of expenses. As the leader of the shelter, he always had to find some ways to make money for the shelter. Make a living. Otherwise, the shelter would never be able to be expanded through farm business alone. His goal is not just to shelter more than 100 mutants, but to create a huge gathering place for mutants, and this cannot be done without money. When Logan looked at the location of the mission in Kosovia, he always felt that it looked familiar, but he couldn't remember it for a while. After thinking about it for a while, he still had no clue, so he simply stopped thinking about it. After looking at the mission information and thinking for a moment, Logan looked back at everyone. If we want to go on the mission together, then Victor, Marcus, and John, plus the 4 of me are enough. They have cooperated more than once, and they are both very capable. Logan trusts them very much. Hey, Uncle Wolf, don't underestimate me because I'm a woman. I think I should also participate in this mission. After hearing Logan's roll call, Lorna immediately stood up unconvinced. She was obviously eager to participate in the mission. Logan gave a helpless smile and said, "Lorna, you have to stay and protect the farm. Now there are several potential threats to the farm. There must be at least one strong person staying behind. You will do your part." He looked at Lorna and chuckled. "Of course, this is only one of the reasons. More importantly, he does not want girls to participate too much in dangerous tasks, especially Lorna. After all, she is Magneto's daughter, and Logan doesn't want her to follow in Magneto's footsteps. Living a good life on a farm is a better way for her to grow up." Listening to Logan's words, Lorna could only nod helplessly. Early the next morning, after Logan asked Caliban to take care of the professor, he took Victor, John and Marcos to Macca's office and received a fake passport and ID card, as well as a ticket to Kosovia. Kosovia is inland in Eastern Europe. It doesn't take too long to fly there from Canada. Even with a layover, it only took less than 20 hours to arrive at the airport in Kosovia. In addition, the fake ID cards prepared by Micah were very complete, and the journey went very smoothly without any obstacles. Kosovia is a small country in Eastern Europe. It has beautiful scenery and attracts a large number of tourists to spend money here every year, mainly based on tourism. When Logan got on the plane, he could clearly feel that there were many people traveling to Sokovia. Most of them came with their families. Before they landed, they were leaning against the plane's porthole and looking at the beautiful scenery below. As the plane landed and the cabin door opened, Logan turned to Victor and others who were traveling with him. "Wear your masks, it's safer." He and Victor are both wanted criminals, and no one is sure whether the United States will send their photos to Sokovia. If they are recognized at the airport, it will be too troublesome. Moreover, they come with a mission and must act in a low-key manner. Victor was obviously a little disdainful, but he still put on the mask honestly. As for Marcus and John, they had no objections. Several people walked out of the station smoothly, but as soon as they stepped out, they were surrounded by taxi drivers. These drivers treated the passengers like vicious dogs that saw meat steaks, and they rushed to surround Logan and the others. Logan and the others were obviously a little uncomfortable with such enthusiasm and waved their hands to say no, but the drivers would not let go and continued to ask about their destination. Just when Logan was troubled by these drivers, he felt a tug on his pocket. If he were an ordinary person, he might just think it was an accidental tug, but after all, Logan had spent more than 10 years in a place like Santa Fe, and he had seen many such low-level money-stealing methods. He quickly reached for his pocket with his palm, and sure enough, the wallet originally lying in his pocket was gone. At the same time, he also noticed a young man wearing a peaked cap. He quickly lowered the peaked cap and walked away quickly with his head lowered. "Hey, stop!" Logan yelled at the young man, but instead of stopping, the young man quickened his pace and shuttled among the crowd. "What's wrong?" Victor on the side looked at Logan in surprise, not understanding what was happening. "He stole my wallet," Logan roared angrily, then pushed away the crowd and chased the young man. "Fake, get out of my way." He was Wolverine, a butcher who killed countless people during World War II. If a little thief stole his wallet here, nearly 200 years would have been in vain. When the thief saw Logan chasing after him, he suddenly panicked and quickened his pace again. The two of them ran wildly outside the airport one after another, but the people around them seemed to have been used to similar things for a long time, and continued to do their own things without being surprised. The young man shuttled among the crowd, making Logan afraid to speed up, although if he ran at full speed, he would be able to catch the young man easily. Given his size, if he did this, he would easily hit a pedestrian. If an ordinary person is hit by him, he will fly at least a few meters and his internal organs will be injured. If the police are alerted, it will be in trouble. Therefore, Logan did not dare to run too fast, so he could only run wildly among the pedestrians. "Boy, if you don't stop, you won't regret it later." Logan roared loudly at the thief, but the thief was obviously very disdainful, and even turned around and said provocatively, "I just stole your wallet, why are you chasing me?" Bang. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a foot suddenly stretched out from the corner in front of him. The young man didn't pay attention and was caught by the foot and fell heavily to the ground. Because the speed was too fast, he rolled around on the ground before stopping, lying on the ground curled up and wailing, and a man walked out of the corner, wearing a crisp suit, a very elegant mustache, and a pair of sunglasses. He walked out cynically, picked up the wallet that the thief had stolen, and handed it to Logan, who came over. He said, "Take it, but don't lose it again. There are a lot of thieves in this place. You'd better put it in a safe place." "Thank you." After taking the wallet, Logan checked the contents inside and felt relieved after making sure that there was nothing missing. After all, his ID card is fake. If he loses it, he cannot get a replacement or ask the embassy for help like other travelers. Stuffing his wallet into his pocket, Logan looked up at the man who helped him. After seeing the man's face clearly, Logan was stunned. "Are you, Tony Stark?" Looking at this all too familiar face, Logan was completely stunned. He didn't expect to meet Iron Man here. After Tony heard what Logan said, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows under his sunglasses, and said with a smile, "I didn't expect that I have fans in Eastern Europe. However, judging from your accent, it doesn't seem like you are from here." "You are from America?" "Yes, I'm here for a trip." Logan tried his best to look like a normal fan. After all, he was still on S.H.I.E.L.'s wanted list. Although his appearance has changed now, he looks much younger, and he even wears a mask, making it difficult for ordinary people to recognize him. However, Logan is still worried that Tony's intelligent butler Jarvis will recognize his true identity. After all, although Tony doesn't seem to be carrying any smart devices, his sunglasses may have recorded his information. Just then, Tony's phone rang. After waving to Logan, he calmly picked up the phone. After listening to what the other party said, Tony nodded and said, "Did you find it?" "I'll be there right away." After saying that, he hung up the phone and turned to Logan and shushed, "Sorry sir, I have something else to do and I can't take a photo with you. I hope you don't tell others that you saw me here. It's not convenient for me to be taken here now. Too many people are paying attention." After saying that, Tony turned and left. Looking at Tony's back, Logan couldn't help but frown. He didn't expect to see Tony here, and judging from the content of his phone call, besides Tony, there seemed to be other Avengers or S.H.I.E.L.D., and they seemed to be performing some mission. This made Logan couldn't help but think about the tasks arranged by Micah, and he couldn't help but feel worried for a while. "I just hope that their missions don't overlap." Now Logan doesn't want to have any conflicts with the Avengers or S.H.I.E.L.D. people. At this moment, Logan suddenly remembered the place named Sokovia. Isn't this the place where the final battle in Age of Ultron takes place? Logan completely remembered that the reason why Kosovia seemed familiar to him was because he had seen it in Avengers 2. Having traveled through time for so long, Logan had forgotten many things. Only after seeing Iron Man here did he finally remember it. Logan tried hard to recall the plot of the movie. After thinking for a long time, he finally figured it out. If the plot develops according to the plot, the Avengers found a missing psychic scepter here at the beginning, and then Logan took advantage of Thor to conduct special research on the scepter before Thor left with the scepter, and accidentally gave birth to Ultron, which triggered Crisis of Ultron. But obviously, Ultron has not yet been born at this time, and revenge comes to Kosovia, which is just the search for the scepter at the beginning of the movie. But Logan clearly remembers the beginning of this movie, where almost all the veteran Avengers participated in the snatching of the Mind Scepter. In other words, except for Tony, all the other Avengers have gathered in Kosovia now. This worried Logan for a moment. If the batch of goods to be obtained in the mission arranged by Maka are also spiritual scepters, it means that they are about to start a war with the Avengers. He was not sure whether he, the current ones, would be able to fight against the Avengers. While Logan was thinking, Victor and several people caught up with him. After seeing the thief lying on the ground wailing, Victor stepped forward with an angry look and kicked him hard. Qin Yen, who was already in pain from the fall, couldn't bear Vic's kick, and his whole body was kicked until he screamed, but Victor didn't tolerate him. So he directly picked up his collar and lifted it up. "Boy, if I catch you stealing money again, I will definitely throw you into the river to feed the fish." After saying that, he punched him hard in the chest again, causing the young man to almost faint from the pain and begging for mercy again and again. Seeing this, Victor threw it down and yelled, "Get out of here." Naturally, the young man did not dare to stay. He endured the severe pain and climbed up dejectedly, and ran away quickly. After dealing with the thief, Marcus noticed Logan's expression. After realizing that he looked wrong, he asked worriedly, "Logan, what's wrong with you? Logan looked at them and murmured, I just met Tony Stark. Iron Man. John was stunned and said in disbelief, why is he here? It's not just him. After a moment of silence, Logan said again, the other Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents should all be here. Marcos was completely stunned when he heard this, and asked quickly, he didn't realize your identity, did he? Probably not. Logan shook his head, and then hurriedly said, let's go to the hotel first, keep a low profile, and don't get discovered. After that, he hurried to the reserved hotel. He understood that the revenge was most likely for the Mind Scepter. As for the Mind Scepter, others didn't know, but Logan knew that it contained an Infinity Stone. Chapter 96 Super Soldier Serum, Thor is coming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A secret underground base on the outskirts of Sokovia, the heavy door of the base opened, and a bright-colored metal figure walked in accompanied by a man in a suit. I thought you didn't plan to come. Hill looked at the two figures and joked with a smile. Feel sorry. Dr. Banner, who was wearing a suit, nodded politely and apologized for being late. The metal figure on the side stood still, opened the armor, and Tony walked out, still looking cynical, and said nonchalantly, Banner was attending a seminar, so he came late, and he is currently leaving midway. Gang, we have to go back after finishing the matter here, so we have to hurry up. Hill nodded, we also want to solve it as soon as possible. Of course, this depends on your efficiency. After saying that, he turned around and walked into a passage. Let's go to the conference room first. I'm waiting for you. Under the leadership of Hill, Banner and Tony came to the conference room. In the conference room at this time, Steve, Natasha, Barton and other key members were already present, and they were all fully armed. Steve was wearing a very familiar battle uniform, a white and blue suit. He was very conspicuous in the conference room and was sitting in his seat seriously. Black Widow Natasha, on the other hand, wore a black tight-fitting suit that highlighted her stunning figure. Hawkeye Barton is also in a black suit, with a quiver on his back and a slender longbow on the table. Tony pulled out a chair and sat down. After looking around, he complained, shocking news, where is the hero? He's not here yet. I thought we were the only ones late. Thor doesn't like that nickname you gave him. Natasha responded jokingly. Steve replied seriously, he is on his way, let us go first, he will arrive at the battlefield before the war is resolved. If I had known it could be like this, I wouldn't have to rush like this. Tony shrugged and raised his hand to look at the watch on his wrist. What time do we leave? You have to ask her about that. Barton pointed at Hill. This operation was arranged by S.H.I.E.L.D. Hill walked to the main seat of the conference table and pressed a button, and a castle built on a cliff was projected onto the table. It has been found that Hydra is hiding in the castle in the Sokovia forest. They have established a strong defense line here, which is even enough to resist the attack of hundreds of thousands of troops. Hill pointed at the castle on the projection and could clearly see that there were many solid fortresses scattered around the outside of the castle. The defense was of great importance, and there might be many dangerous bunkers that could not be scanned by satellites. So, this is our goal. Tony looked at the projected castle and suddenly lost interest. If you want me to clean up this illegal building, I can bring in dozens of missiles at any time for all-round bombing. After the bombing, I guarantee that you will not even get half of it intact. There are no bricks to be found. Although Stark Industries is no longer involved in the military industry, it can still be easily done if you want to get a few efficient missiles. If that doesn't work, he can easily hack into any country that has intercontinental missiles and launch a few missiles nearby. We are not terrorists. Hill looked at Tony and firmly rejected his idea, and then added, and destroying Hydra is only one of the tasks. Our plan is to retrieve the Mind Scepter. That thing is now hidden in the castle. Although it's an alien product, but we can't tell whether it will be blown up by your missiles. Besides, this is not the Americas. Launching missiles here indiscriminately can easily become an international incident. We must pay attention to the international impact. Hill solemnly warned Tony not to mess around. Okay. Tony shook his head in compromise. Whatever, the result is the same anyway, but you, S.H.I.E.L.D., are finally reliable for once. At least you found the scepter before it was completely lost. Tony, you have to take this mission seriously. Hill looked at Tony seriously, we only have this chance. If we can't get the scepter back, Hydra will definitely be on high alert, and we'll have no chance. I have paid great attention to it, otherwise what would be parked outside would not be my armor, but my sports car. Tony stood up and said, okay, since the goal is clear, let's start quickly. Dr. Bana will have a meeting later. In the forest of Sokovia, the motorcycle roared in the forest, startling the birds and beasts around. Logan drove the second-hand motorcycle he just bought through the woods, and finally stopped in front of an abandoned ranger cabin. Behind him, Victor and others followed closely in their cars. Several people took off their helmets and looked at the dilapidated hut. It seemed that no one had been to this house for a long time. The surroundings were covered with weeds, and there was some moss on the wooden steps. The surroundings were surrounded by lush trees, and the sunlight shone through the gaps in the dense leaves. Micah asked us to wait here. Victor looked at the wooden house and couldn't help complaining, can't we find a better place to connect it? Logan was also a little helpless, no way, this is the location they chose. Logan got out of the car and walked into the cabin. Their task seemed very simple on the surface, which was to wait for the arrival of the contact person in the wooden house. They would hand over the goods to Logan and his team, and Logan and his team only needed to take the goods back to the farm. But in this seemingly simple task, Logan smelled a strong sense of crisis. After all, the Avengers were all in Sokovia, and basically all the first-generation Avengers had gathered. If they ran into them, the consequences would be disastrous. At this time, Victor and his team also entered the wooden house. The wooden house was very simple. As a temporary shelter for forest rangers, the wooden house could basically only provide shelter from the wind and rain. There was not even a chair, so several people sat on the ground and waited with boredom. As a result, they waited for more than an hour. Logan kept looking at the time, and the agreed contact time had long passed. The long wait made Marcos and his team complain again and again. Don't people here have a sense of time when doing things? Marcos stood by the window and kept looking out the window, but there was no living creature outside except a few birds on the tree. Victor was also waiting impatiently. According to the time, shouldn't they have arrived half an hour ago? Irritation gradually rose in the cabin. Only Logan sat in the corner of the cabin, frowning, for some reason. He always had a bad feeling, and just at this moment, the phone in his pocket suddenly rang. It was a call from Maka. As soon as the call was connected, the message from Maka came hurriedly. Logan, are you still at the agreed location? Yes. Logan nodded in response, but the contact person hasn't shown up yet. They can't come. Maka's tone was a little anxious. I just received news that the goods were hijacked by Hydra. This batch of goods is really important and must not be lost. I need you to hijack it back from Hydra. Hearing this, Logan frowned immediately. He didn't want to have any intersection with Hydra. The danger level of this organization is even greater than that of S.H.I.E.L.D. At least S.H.I.E.L.D. can still abide by some legal constraints when doing things, but if they really get into trouble with Hydra, those guys can really do anything. Maka, Hydra is not easy to deal with. Logan responded to the phone. I know they are dangerous. Maka said anxiously, but the goods must not be lost. You must think of a way to bring the goods back. This is really important. Logan heard the urgency in Maka's tone and hesitated for a moment. We only have this one chance. If we can't get the goods back, the consequences will be very serious. Logan, for the farm, and for you and the professor to have a safe place, you must find a way. Maka's voice came again. Since it was about the shelter, Logan had no reason to refuse. He could only sigh helplessly. Okay, I'll find a way. I'll send you the address right now. After hearing Logan's agreement, Maka seemed to relax a lot and continued, you guys should rush over now. You must find a way to retrieve the goods. After that, the phone was hung up, and a text message followed, which was the coordinates of the Hydra hideout. What's wrong? Victor came over to ask, and Marcos and John behind him were also curious. They didn't hear the conversation between Logan and Maka clearly. Something happened. Logan sighed and simply told the information Maka said. After the explanation, Logan stood up and sighed helplessly. This batch of goods is obviously very important, we have to set off quickly. But, just relying on us, to fight Hydra. Marcos thought this was really a fantasy. After all, Hydra's army, and even the government army, were a headache. It was a thorn in the eyes of S.H.I.E.L.D. The power of a few of them was obviously too small. John was also worried, thinking that this was an impossible task. Victor, on the other hand, was excited. What are you afraid of? I also led a team to fight those guys during World War II. It's not as scary as you think. Looking at the appearance of several people, Logan shook his head. Don't talk nonsense, we can't refuse this mission. Go quickly, find a chance to sneak into Hydra, and then find a way to get the goods out. Everyone looked at each other, and could only nod helplessly, walked out of the wooden house, and rode to the destination, but just after driving for a while, several people heard dense gunfire coming from the depths of the forest. There are gunshots. Logan stopped the motorcycle and signaled several people to stop behind him and carefully distinguished the gunshots coming from afar. It can be heard that the battle over there is very fierce. The sounds of machine guns, mortars, and howitzers are constantly heard, just like a war. It doesn't sound good. Marcos looked solemn and listened carefully to the gunfire in the distance. Is it not just the Hydra people who are robbing the goods, but there are also other people who have set their eyes on that batch of things and are competing with Hydra for it? Listening to the gunshots, it feels like other organizations have also come to Hydra to intercept the goods. If this is true, judging from the fierce gunfire, the strength of that organization should not be underestimated. Logan frowned, vaguely guessed the reason for the gunfire, and waved his hand and said, "Stop the motorcycle here, let's go over and take a look." Everyone hid the motorcycle and ran quickly towards the location where the gunshots came from. After approaching, they slowly lurked, leaned against a tree, and stared at the front carefully. What caught my eye was a very majestic mountain, with a castle on the top of the cliff. At this time, there was gunfire below, and groups of soldiers in the trenches were shooting and shuttling through the woods. They are Hydra soldiers. Victor noticed the Hydra logo on the chests of those soldiers, recognized their identities, and then looked at the position where the soldiers were attacking, frowning. Who are they dealing with? On the other side, Logan frowned. After seeing the Hydra's lair, he was completely sure that the goods that Maka mentioned were the Mind Scepter. That was something that both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra coveted. Logan hesitated a little. It was still time to leave. He looked at the castle on the mountain. The Mind Scepter was in the castle. It was almost one step away. In the end, he still didn't choose to retreat. Perhaps it was an opportunity for them to completely muddy the water. Moreover, Logan remembered that there was super soldier serum in the castle, and the professor and Victor needed the serum to recover. Bang! Just as Logan was thinking, a loud noise suddenly erupted from the group of soldiers in front. A laser shell fired from the air directly blasted the soldiers within 10 meters of the explosion into pieces, with broken limbs and arms scattered and blood flowing all over the ground. Logan looked up at the figure firing the weapon. The red battle suit was extremely eye-catching in the blue sky, and the limbs were spraying blue flames from the thrusters, and it flew quickly from the sky. It's Iron Man. He stared at the figure in the sky with a frown. It seems that the Avengers are one step ahead of us. What should we do now? Marcos looked at the battle with a worried look on his face. In this situation, if they intervened, they would be beaten into sieves by both sides in an instant. Wait and see. Logan remained calm and pulled a few people into the bushes beside him, hiding them perfectly. Through the gaps in the bushes, he carefully checked the situation outside. There were only 4 of them. Going out would be a death trap. It would be better for the Avengers to consume Hydra's forces. When they find an opportunity, they will seize the scepter. At the same time, the battle on the Avengers' side was very fierce. Steve held a shield and shuttled through the trenches. He basically did not use firearms, but every enemy he encountered could last for 1 second. This World War II veteran hated Hydra and was extremely ruthless. His super fighting skills and indestructible round shield made him an invincible god of war. As long as the trenches he locked were basically not far from being scrapped, however, Hydra's counterattack was no joke. The artillery kept firing, the rumbling sound of explosions was endless, the smoke filled the trenches, and the roar of the explosion was deafening. The soil was blown up by the artillery, and gravel and soil were splashed everywhere. The shock wave of the explosion blew the surrounding trees, but Steve was not panicked. His steps were steady and fast, as if he was a blue shadow. While running at high speed, his eyes were locked on one enemy after another, and he threw out the round shield in his hand. The round shield flashed with cold light under the reflection of the fire, like a stream of light, accurately hitting the enemy, and then rebounded and hit another enemy again. After several rebounds in succession, a soldier would be knocked down by the shield every time he hit. After the final rebound, the shield flew back to Steve, and he caught it accurately and hung it back in his hand. "Is that Captain America?" Marcos looked at Steve in astonishment and couldn't help but complain. "Is that thing in his hand a shield or a tracking missile?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Steve rushing to the enemy, waving his fists continuously, and each punch was accompanied by a clear sound of breaking wind. With just one punch, no matter how tall the enemy was, he could be easily solved, and in the air, the red and gold steel armor, like a bomber, kept launching missiles. The Hydra fortresses exploded as soon as they came into contact with the missiles. The solid fortresses turned into scorched earth in an instant, and the bodies of the Hydra soldiers flew out along with the stones and soil. "Good job. At this speed, they will soon be able to kill all the Hydra bastards." Victor couldn't help but get excited when he saw the Avengers' unstoppable performance in the battle. After all, he had a bad impression of Hydra. They were real enemies during World War II. However, as soon as this sentence fell, a rumbling sound came from a distance. Victor looked over and his face suddenly changed. He couldn't help but swear, "Fuck, is that a tank? Your crow's mouth is working." Logan looked in the direction of Victor's gaze, and saw 3 tanks driving out from under the castle side by side, turning the huge muzzles, locking the Avengers, and firing without hesitation. Boom! The deafening sound of the artillery echoed, and the shells whizzed through the air and blasted toward Steve and others. At the same time, the anti-aircraft missiles in the corner also began to fire. The missiles locked by the thermal imaging rushed towards Tony. No matter how Tony moved, he could not resist the pursuit of the anti-aircraft missiles. It was like a hyena, biting Tony tightly. "Damn, these guys even have main battle tanks." Natasha and Patton, who were cleaning up the battlefield in the back, watched the artillery shells flying and couldn't help complaining. Natasha pinched the headset and asked anxiously, "Captain, are you okay?" Just now, the muzzles of the 3 tanks were all aimed at Steve. Cough cough cough. Steve coughed in the headset. He was lying on the ground. The soil raised by the explosion almost buried him. After poking his head out of the soil, he panted loudly into the headset, "It's okay for now, Tony, deal with those 3 guys. Captain, if you see me being chased by 3 missiles that can kill me at any time, you shouldn't say such things." Tony's voice came. At this time, he was trying to get rid of the locked missiles behind him. "It seems that they can't solve Hydra in a short time." Marcos looked at the battlefield that was in a stalemate. "Let's go around and find a way to get into Hydra while no one is paying attention behind us." However, Logan didn't mean to move, and said lightly, "Don't worry." Roar! Bang bang bang! Just when Steve couldn't raise his head due to the pressure of the shells and Tony was busy with his own affairs, a roar suddenly broke out from the depths of the jungle. A huge green figure rushed out of the woods. The huge body was running at high speed, and even the earth couldn't stop shaking. At first glance, it looked like a heavy tank running at high speed, full of infinite suppression. "Hulk, this guy is here too." Victor's pupils shrank. He had seen news reports about the Hulk's battle. During the New York battle, this big guy could blow up a spaceship with one punch. "My God, this power, even from such a distance I can clearly feel the ground shaking." Marcos was horrified. John couldn't help but take a breath. He had only seen the Hulk on TV before, but now seeing it with his own eyes was much more shocking than on TV. "Not only is he here, Thor is here too." Logan was still very calm and looked up at the horizon. At this time, thunderclouds rolled in the sky. Dark clouds were dense, lightning flashed continuously in the dark clouds, rumbling sounds were endless, rough thunder and lightning seemed to split the sky and the earth, and the thunder roared like a roar from the abyss. In the huge thunder and lightning, a figure rushed through the black clouds and rushed over at a high speed. The fiery red cloak fluttered behind him, and all the thunder and lightning roared at the same time, as if welcoming their king, and the thunder in the sky jumped fiercely and harshly. The thunder seemed to explode in front of their eyes, and the lightning seemed to fall on their heads. Everyone looked up at the sky and felt suffocated. Chapter 97 Tearing apart a tank with bare hands. Is this a carbon-based creature? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thor is here too. Logan frowned, looking at the rolling thunderclouds in the sky. The dense thunderclouds almost completely covered the sunlight, and the whole world fell into darkness. The fluttering thunder and lightning were like a sharp blade splitting the sky, bringing dazzling flashes. Taiwan Novel Network. The rumbling thunder was like a landslide, stretching endlessly. The dark clouds made people breathless, like the prelude to a storm. Boom. In the thunder, Thor held Thor's hammer, wearing Asgard armor, and a fiery red cloak behind him, crossed the clouds, passed through the thunder, and fell from the sky. Boom. The hammer hit the ground hard, raising countless dust. He looked up at the tank in the middle and said coldly, "Accept the punishment of God." The next moment, the thick lightning in the air seemed to be pulled, and it flew down from the sky with the force of thunder. The rumbling sound of the thunderstorm was like the explosion of the end of the world, which continued. The rough lightning hit the tank abruptly, and the violent thunder instantly tore the tank apart. The explosion rose up, and the fire from the tank explosion illuminated Thor's armor and the hurricane blew his cloak. Thor stood in the storm and looked coldly at the tank that was torn into pieces and exploded. The bright arcs kept jumping in the air, and the uncovered land was filled with bursts of scorched black. The terrifying shock wave swept the earth, like a hurricane, blowing the surrounding trees to sway immobily, and the dust on the ground was blown up by the strong wind, like a sandstorm. Finally here. Steve, who was lying in the trench, pulled off the dirt on his body, stood up and looked at Thor's back, and breathed a sigh of relief. This guy. Natasha behind him also breathed a sigh of relief, looking at the flamboyant Thor with a smile. Too weak. Thor swung his hammer and kicked the tank in front of him away, turned his head and looked at Steve and the others with a bored look. Don't you have anything new? Who do you expect to hit with this broken thing? Fuck. Marcos, who was far away, was stunned when he saw the thunder power bursting out from Thor. After a while, he widened his eyes and murmured, as expected of Thor, who else can stop this thunder power? A light blow can destroy a main battle tank. Is this something that carbon-based creatures can do? This guy is not easy to deal with. After being shocked for a long time, Victor couldn't help but murmured, he rarely admires others. Even if the enemy is stronger than himself, he will usually charge fearlessly, but now, after seeing the thunder power of Thor, he couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. For more than 200 years, few people have brought him such deep worries. My God, the main battle tank known as the King of the Land has become slag in an instant. If it hits a person, wouldn't it be annihilated directly? John was also stunned and stared at the front, his pupils staring at Thor, and he really realized the fear of the Avengers. Logan looked at the expressions of several of them and sighed helplessly. What they didn't know was that the ability Thor showed now was only 1/10 of his true strength. As one of the 3 giants in the Avengers, this guy's strength is simply terrifying. The thunder power that bursts out with all his strength can even smash a mountain, and the defense of the body is even more terrifying. As a descendant of the gods of Asgard, with the blood of the god King Odin flowing in his body is unimaginably hard. At his peak, he can even withstand the energy impact of an entire neutron star. That level of energy is incomparable to the energy generated by the explosion of the total nuclear bombs on Earth, and can even shatter the entire Earth. And Thor not only survived, but also survived for a long time before collapsing. Of course, he is not that strong now, but his physical strength should not be underestimated. Even facing a nuclear bomb explosion, he can be safe. After all, he was still intact after being sucked into a black hole, and this is just Thor alone. In addition to this Thor, the current Avengers also include Hulk, who becomes stronger the more angry he is, and Tony, whose technology is unpredictable, coupled with Captain America and Natasha, who have superb combat skills, and Barton, who provides remote support, it can be said that there is no force on Earth that can compete with them. Logan knows very well that it is not so easy to successfully take away the goods this time. Roar, roar, roar. A roar came from a distance, and Hulk was obviously unwilling to be outdone, running madly towards another tank that wanted to aim the gun at Thor. His huge fist slammed into the barrel, and the tank's gunner was so scared that he hurriedly pressed the launch button. Boom. In an instant, the shell ignited and fired, colliding with Hulk's fist in the barrel. A violent explosion sounded, and the barrel supported by fine iron exploded directly, while Hulk's hand was safe and sound. Roar! He roared at the tank, grabbed the front of the tank with both hands, and the main battle tank weighing dozens of tons was easily lifted up by him. Then an even more horrifying scene appeared. Hulk pulled hard with both hands, and the huge tank was torn apart directly, as if it was as fragile as paper. The bodies of several driving members who had been killed by shells earlier fell from the broken part of the tank. Hulk forcefully threw one side of the tank towards the last tank that wanted to escape. Boom. Half of the tank's remains hit the escaping tank heavily. The powerful force directly crushed the tank and turned it into a pile of scrap metal. The driver inside was also crushed into a meat pie. Hulk was obviously not satisfied yet. Tearing apart the remaining half of the tank in his hand, he tore up dozens of tons of tank wreckage as easily as paper, threw it to the ground and stamped on it, smashing a good tank into pieces. Marcos and others in the distance were completely dumbfounded, looking at the remains of the tank that were trampled on the ground by the Hulk and looked like scrap metal. His eyes were filled with deep fear. He turned to stare at Logan and said with a dull look on his face, "Why don't we go back first? If we really want to follow them when we encounter each other, I feel like this big green guy can break me to pieces with just a snap of his fingers." John nodded dully. "If you can't beat them, how can you beat them? Although we are mutants, we are still humans, not gods." Seeing this horrifying scene, the two of them were completely frightened. No matter what the mission is, life is at stake. If we were to encounter these Avengers, we might not even be able to survive. The two people's remarks immediately aroused Victor's dissatisfaction. He reached out and slapped the two of them on the head. "What are you talking about? I ran away before I even started. Surrendering has never been my habit." Although he was also very afraid of the Avengers' strength, he was unwilling to retreat like this. After all, stealing under the noses of such powerful people was more exciting. Logan also nodded. He had no intention of giving up on this mission. He took out a mask from his pocket and put it on his face, and then said to several people, "Okay, everyone put on the mask, let's go to the castle first. While Hydra's attention is now on the Avengers, let's act quickly and steal the goods before the Avengers get in." This was his plan. In his memory, although this battle was an all-round crushing of Hydra by the Avengers, it actually consumed a lot of time. Moreover, they will also encounter the obstacles of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. This is an excellent opportunity for Logan and the others. They can take advantage of this gap to take out the Mind Scepter. After hearing what Logan said, Victor happily put on his mask, while Marcus and John looked at the battle situation in the distance with fear, gritted their teeth, and put on their masks, covering half of their faces. Logan is right, the battle is fierce now. It is a good time for them to fish in troubled waters. As everyone put on their masks, they carefully led a few people closer to the castle on the cliff. After all, this operation is very dangerous. If you are not careful, you may be recognized by the Avengers or S.H.I.E.L.D. people, and maybe they will be traced to Sanctuary because of their faces. In order to avoid causing trouble for the shelter, Logan prepared masks for several people before setting off. Several people carefully bypassed the main battlefield and planned to sneak towards the castle from the edge of the trench, and now Hydra and the Avengers are fighting fiercely. Hulk relied on his huge body to crash into fortresses one after another like a tank. Thor kept swinging the thunder hammer, knocking away any Hydra soldiers who came to support. With these two men opening the way in all directions, the Avengers' progress was very rapid. While Captain America and Natasha were in the back, they were dealing with the remaining miscellaneous fish. Hawkeye Barton was in the back, constantly using various bows and arrows to deal with some guys who were planning to hide in the dark for sneak attacks. But although they are very powerful, after all, Hydra's defense measures are really good, and there are many soldiers. Artillery shells and troops are constantly coming to stop them, so the Avengers on the ground have no time to notice Logan on the edge. As for Tony, who was flying in the sky, he had already flown somewhere to avoid anti-aircraft missiles, and there was no trace of him in the sky. "Hurry up, Dot!" At the edge of the trench, Logan urged in a low voice, and several people ran behind him. As a result, just after taking a few steps, several members of Hydra suddenly appeared next to them and pointed their guns at them. "Which group are you from? Why don't you stop those guys quickly? If you run away, be careful, I will kill you." A Hydra soldier stared at Logan and the others, apparently recognizing them as Hydra soldiers who wanted to escape from the battlefield. Logan and the others stopped and stared at those guys. "You bastard, I'll kill you first." Victor's temper suddenly became violent. He stretched out his tiger claws and flew toward the Hydra member who was speaking. Like a hungry tiger pouncing on food, the sharp tiger claws instantly pierced the chest of the Hydra soldier, holding his heart from his back, and squeezed it hard, and the heart broke instantly. The splattered blood covered Victor's face. The sudden scene stunned several other Hydra soldiers, and they were so frightened that they quickly turned their guns to shoot at Victor, with quick eyesight and quick hands. Logan took out his pistol and accurately opened the skulls of the soldiers next to Victor. John and Marcos also reacted and quickly took out their pistols and shot. Bang bang bang. After a few gunshots, the Hydra soldiers fell to the ground. After dealing with these small fry, Victor wiped his bloody hands on the tree next to him, simply wiped off the blood stains and minced meat, and looked at the corpse on the ground with disdain. Logan put away his gun and walked forward helplessly. "Victor, when you get old, use the gun more, don't always fight hand to hand, your self-healing factor is not as strong as before." Now Victor's self-healing factor has gradually degenerated due to aging and the suppression of genetically modified foods. He is not as immortal as before. Facing Logan's reminder, Victor pursed his lips disdainfully. "What are you afraid of? It's just a gun, I can handle it." Unless the opponent takes out a rocket, Victor is not worried at all. Ordinary guns can't kill him for the time being. Logan shook his head helplessly, looked at the castle in the distance, and said, "Keep going." At the same time, the battle on the Avengers' side is still very fierce. In order to stop the Avengers from continuing their attack, Hydra dispatched several howitzers. This weapon that fired large-caliber grenades could leave a deep pit several meters deep on the ground with just one shot. Boom boom boom. The grenades were fired at the same time, and hundreds of shells kept flying towards the Avengers. Looking at these howitzers, Hulk roared, hunched over, and blocked his face with his arms, letting the shells hit him. Boom boom boom. The huge body was instantly submerged in the flames. On the other side, Thor, waving Thor's hammer, also looked at these artillery with disdain, and held his chest hard. Steve behind him frowned and hurriedly raised his shield. Natasha and Barton also hurriedly looked for cover. Boom boom boom. The grenades fell, and instantly exploded into beams of fire, and the fireworks and dust buried Hulk and Thor in them. The impact of the explosion directly cut all the surrounding trees in half, and the broken soil and dust flew, rolling up a hurricane like a sandstorm. As the first round of volleys ended, the battlefield fell into a short period of silence. Roar. But this silence was interrupted by a roar, and the huge body of Hulk appeared in the dust, and the expression on his face became more and more angry. On the other side, Thor also flapped his palms, swept the dust in front of his face, and still appeared intact. Looking at the row of howitzers, he swung Thor's hammer vigorously. His body flew out with Thor's hammer, and smashed it down hard. The powerful thunder force burst out from the hammer, directly blowing away the entire howitzer position. Dozens of howitzers were completely destroyed as if they were made of paper. As the howitzer position was resolved, Thor swung the hammer again, constantly washing one trench after another, like a killing god, solving these Hydra soldiers. He even had time to come to Steve's side, cooperate with Steve, hit the shield with a hammer, release the terrifying power of thunder and lightning, and clear a large area of the battlefield. Hulk in the distance looked at Thor's wanton and flamboyant appearance on the battlefield. He was obviously a little unhappy with his swagger. The anger on his face deepened a bit, and his huge body rushed towards the running bases that were constantly shooting again. Boom boom boom. The powerful force directly destroyed one fortress after another, and with each collision, the anger on his face became deeper. Barton noticed the change on Hulk's face and frowned. No, Hulk is going to lose control. After listening to the voice in the headset, Steve kicked a soldier in front of him away, and frowned at the figure of Hulk who kept colliding. He understood that if Hulk completely lost control and rushed into the nearby city, it would bring unimaginable disasters. Natasha, go and appease Hulk. Thor, we continue to attack. Steve spoke into the headset, and then continued to wave his shield to fight against the Hydra soldiers who came one by one without risking their lives. Without the tanks and howitzer positions, the only role of these soldiers is to use their lives to block the speed of the Avengers' attack. With the cooperation of several Avengers, the battle line advanced step by step, leaving behind piles of corpses. At the same time, Logan had brought a few people to the bottom of the castle, successfully climbed onto the balcony, and climbed into the castle from the balcony. Looking back at the lingering war below, several people couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. All the way, because of the Avengers' containment, no Hydra soldiers noticed them at all, and they had a smooth journey. Let's go, Maka said. The goods are downstairs. It's a scepter. Logan retracted his gaze and urged the people around him. Although the mission was about to be completed, he didn't have much joy. After all, the Mind Scepter contains the Infinity Stones, and countless forces are coveting that thing. If he succeeds, Logan doesn't know whether it will bring more trouble. Victor obviously doesn't know Logan's worries. Looking at the Avengers fighting in the distance, he joked, I hope these Hydra guys can be more powerful and hold the Avengers back a little longer so that we can take the things away. Although the Avengers are very strong, Victor couldn't help laughing when he thought of the group of people who broke into the castle and found that the things had been stolen. What are you talking about? Bang. As soon as Victor's voice fell, a crisp voice suddenly rang in their ears. A steel-red shadow descended from the sky, looking at Logan and his companions with a slightly nonchalant tone, and said to the communication, Captain, it seems that it is not only Hydra that is eyeing the scepter, but also several stowaways who want to take advantage of the situation to sneak into the castle. We almost became their cover. Tony Stark. Logan looked at the figure with a frown. After hearing Logan's voice, Tony was obviously a little stunned, and only felt that the voice was familiar. Looking at Logan carefully, although Logan's face was half blocked by the mask, Tony still recognized Logan's identity. You seem familiar. Have we met before? He stared at Logan, and Jarvis began to scan Logan's face, inferring Logan's true appearance under the mask, and Tony seemed to remember it, and murmured, we must have met before, it seems, at the airport. Chapter 98 Scarlet Light, Mountains of Corpses and Seas of Blood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The situation is not good. Marcus stared at Tony with a wary face, and secretly touched his lower back with his palms. Logan put away his gun and said, Mr. Stark, we have something to discuss. At this moment, Tony seemed to remember something. So it's you. It's not wise to steal the Avengers things, but now. Search TWKAN on Google. To be precise, that thing still belongs to Hydra. Klaus on the side spoke without blinking and refuted Tony's words. Tony turned to look at him. Boy, be careful what you say. That was originally our thing, but it was stolen by Hydra guys. After speaking, he turned his attention back to Logan. He could see that Logan was the leader of this team. Sorry sir, I can't help you this time. While speaking, Tony raised his hands, a dazzling light flashed in his palms, and the energy gathered in them was ready to be released. Everyone, squat down with your heads in your hands. I don't want any unnecessary casualties here. Marcus and others looked at Tony's mecha's palm cannon and couldn't help but take 2 steps back in fear. Although this was their first encounter with Iron Man, they had already heard about Iron Man's strength and understood that the power of his palm cannon should not be underestimated. Tony, what's going on over there? In the mecha, Steve's voice came from the communicator. It's okay. I caught a few stowaways. It seems they are also some guys who want to steal the scepter. I have them under control. Tony responded in the mecha, his tone still very casual. It was obvious that he did not consider Logan and the others a threat. How are you doing over there? Have all the enemies outside been dealt with? At this time, he had noticed that on the battlefield behind him, the sound of gunfire was gradually decreasing, and the battlefield was gradually stopping. It seemed that the fighting had stopped. Not yet. Steve's tone was a little heavy. There is a very fast guy blocking our way. The guy's speed is as fast as a ray of silver light. We can't lock onto him, and we are currently in a stalemate with him. Judging from his tone, that guy obviously caused them a lot of trouble. Tony listened to his words and was about to respond when he suddenly saw a black shadow flashing in front of him. He suddenly came back to his senses and saw Victor flying towards him like a tiger, his sharp nails scratching the armor's mask without hesitation. Click. There was a harsh friction sound, and the paint on the mask was scratched by sharp claws, leaving several clear and deep claw marks. Shit, the sudden attack made Tony's expression darken. He raised his palm without hesitation and fired a bright beam of light at Victor's chest. Victor had quick eyes and quick hands, and he dodged sideways. The palm cannon grazed his clothes and hit the wall nearby. Boom. The sound of explosions came, and a large gap was opened in the thick wall, with rubble flying everywhere. What's wrong? Steve's worried voice sounded from inside the suit again. Fine. Tony restrained his cynicism and became serious, saying in a deep voice, I'm afraid you have to deal with that fast guy on your own. I have to arrest these smugglers first. Although Victor's attack didn't work, Tony could tell from his speed and strength that these guys were definitely not ordinary people. At the same time, Victor turned to Logan and said, you go and get the goods first, and I'll hold this tin guy down. He knew very well that if they didn't complete the mission quickly, they wouldn't be able to escape until the other Avengers eliminated the enemies outside and surrounded them. They can't fight against all the Avengers now. Logan glanced at Victor and frowned, but he didn't refuse. He just said, okay, be careful. This guy is not easy to deal with. Although it is a bit risky to let Victor face Iron Man alone, this is the only way to do it now. After all, they are now racing against time. Only by completing the mission before Steve and the others can they have a chance to escape. Otherwise, they may all be imprisoned by S.H.I.E.L.D. forever. But before leaving, Logan glanced at Victor and Tony on the other side, and then turned his eyes to John and the team. John, you stay to assist Victor, be careful. If it were the young Victor, Logan would naturally feel free to let him fight Iron Man alone. After all, Tony's research on armor has not yet reached its peak, and the ability of the Mark 43 he wears is still relatively limited. Coupled with Victor's self-healing factor, it is enough to compete with him in a short time, but now that Victor is old after all, his self-healing factor has declined very seriously, and his physical strength have declined. Logan is really worried about him fighting Tony alone, and asking John to assist him can relieve him to some extent. Pressure. After hearing Logan's arrangement, John did not refuse. He nodded and said okay. After that, he turned to look at Tony who was confronting Victor. He jumped behind Tony and hugged him from the back, trying to trap him with his own strength, but he obviously underestimated Iron Man's power. Tony glanced at him sideways and said calmly, I'm not used to such intimate actions with men. After saying that, he raised his elbow and hit John behind him hard. Puff. A dull collision sounded, and Tony's elbow strike was like a hammer, hitting John's stomach and making a dull groan in his throat, but he had no intention of loosening up, and planned to lock Tony tightly with his limbs. After several consecutive elbow strikes failed, Tony was a little helpless and activated the thrusters on the soles of his feet. Momentum directly pushed his body back heavily, and took John to the wall behind him. Bang! The solid wall sank instantly, forming a circle of dense cracks around it. The violent collision made John feel that his internal organs were constantly surging, his throat groaned, blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, and his limbs were forced to loosen and let go of Tony. Tony was about to say a few words to John, but a black shadow flashed in front of him again. Victor rushed towards him with his long claws, and his powerful fists made a sound of breaking wind. Tony was hit on the head by him accidentally, and the powerful force made the frame of the armor ring. If it was a normal person's skull, it would at least be broken under this blow. Fortunately, Tony was protected by the armor and did not suffer any damage, but Victor's attack continued. This continuous attack made Tony unable to resist for a while, and the fists he swung would be detected by Victor and dodged. Tony was a little annoyed for a while and said, Jarvis, analyze his moves. Okay, sir. The voice of artificial intelligence Jarvis sounded from under the mask, and then began to scan Victor's offensive and analyze it. A few seconds later, a set of enemy plans specifically for Victor was formulated. Tony seemed to have evolved into a fighting master. He suddenly leaned back to avoid Victor's claws. At the same time, he raised his leg as if he knew what was going on. Almost at the same time, Victor's whip kick swept out, but was blocked by the mecha's calf. Victor was stunned, and launched a fierce attack again, using all the fighting skills he had learned in his life, but Tony at this time was no longer the passive punching bag just now. It seemed that he had become a fighting master on par with Victor in an instant. No matter how fierce Victor's attack was, he could easily block it. This. How is it possible? During the attack, Victor couldn't help but exclaimed, looking at the suddenly flexible armor. He was a little confused for a while. You know, in his 200 years of life, basically half of it was spent in battle. At least in terms of fighting skills, except for Logan, he has not met an opponent, but now facing Tony, it seems that all his moves have been deciphered. Not only can he be easily blocked by Tony, but he can even hit him with a few heavy punches from time to time. On Tony's side, after using the solution provided by Jarvis, it was much easier to fight with Victor. Whether it was defense or attack, the mask would give accurate prompts, and he just had to follow the prompts to complete it. Gradually, he even crushed Victor in fighting, and his iron fist made Victor gradually unable to resist. Taking advantage of a gap when Victor swung his fist, Tony bent down and swept out a leg. Victor couldn't avoid it in time, and his legs were swept by the powerful force. He lost his center of gravity and fell heavily, but before he fell to the ground, Tony kicked up like a ball, kicked Victor up again, stretched out both hands at the same time, condensed the palm cannon, and hit Victor's chest in mid-air without hesitation. Boom. The palm cannon accurately hit Victor's chest, and the powerful impact directly knocked Victor away and hit the wall behind him. Boom. The thick wall was suddenly knocked open by his impact, and a huge hole was opened. Victor fell behind the hole, and the waste bricks on the wall directly buried him, raising a cloud of dust. Tony looked at the pile of rubble in the dust, and could vaguely see Victor's bloody body under the ruins, and he breathed a long sigh of relief. Finally solved. Tony couldn't help but murmured. At least in fighting, this guy is indeed a tough opponent, and his strength and flexibility cannot be underestimated. After a fight, Tony's armor has been covered with many terrible claw marks. Looking at these claw marks, Tony was even a little scared. If he hadn't been wearing armor and fighting him like this, I'm afraid his chest would have been completely torn open by him. But fortunately, it was finally solved. Just as Tony exhaled and wanted to deal with John on the other side, a violent cough suddenly came from the rubble. Cough, cough, cough. Victor's voice came again, and a hand stretched out from the rubble, pushed away the rubble buried on his body, and struggled to stand up. At this time, Victor was obviously not feeling well. The palm cannon almost blew away all the flesh in front of his chest, his clothes were completely torn, his chest was bloody, blood kept dripping, and a clear blood mark flowed from the corner of his mouth. But as Victor stood still, the blood in his chest recovered visibly, and the bloody chest seemed to be slowly repaired as if something was wriggling. It's okay. Tony stopped and looked at Victor in disbelief. The palm cannon he just used would have scrapped a car, not to mention a person, but Victor not only took it, but also stood up. Looking at his appearance, he seemed to have the ability to continue fighting. Who are you? Tony instantly realized that these people could never be ordinary humans. Normal people could not have such strong defenses, unless this guy, like Steve, had been injected with super serum or had some kind of defense. Call out. Just as he was thinking, a harsh sound of breaking wind suddenly came from behind him. Tony's expression changed, but at Jarvis's reminder, he turned around suddenly and raised his palm to catch the flying thing. It was a thick steel plate, about the same size as a table, made of solid material, and weighed at least dozens of kilograms. The person holding the other side of the steel plate and waving it towards Tony was none other than John. He gritted his teeth and held on to the steel plate with a look of unwillingness to surrender in his eyes. Sneak attack is not a good boy. Tony looked at John's gritted teeth and snorted disdainfully. Oh shit! John's eyes were full of anger, and he jerked his hands. The huge steel plate suddenly escaped Tony's grasp, and was pulled back by John. the dozens of kilograms of steel plates made a loud noise when John swung them, and they fell towards Tony again. Tony dodged, and the steel plate scraped against his face and hit the ground hard. The powerful force caused the floor to tremble slightly, and the dust was blown away by the heavy blow, and the dust flew up for a while. Tony stepped hard on the steel plate, completely eliminating the possibility of John lifting it up to launch an attack. However, he did not deal with John immediately, but looked at him curiously. "You all seem to have special bodies." He stared at John and noticed that there were no obvious wounds on the other person's body, and there were no restrictions on the movement of his limbs. "This is not normal. You must know that the impact just now is enough to cause serious fractures or even fatal injuries to ordinary people, but this person is not doing anything at all, and he is even so powerful." Thinking of this, Tony couldn't help but turn his head and look at Victor. Although Victor's injuries have not completely healed at this time, the bleeding has stopped, and some minor scratches on his arms have also completely healed. Recalling Victor's strength and speed just now, Tony also had a suspicion in his mind and asked the two of them, "Are you mutants?" Except for super soldiers like Steve who have been injected with super serum, the only people who can physically resist blows and also have strong strength and speed are mutants who have mutated. While there was a fierce battle here, Logan had already led Marcus and Klaus deep into the castle. At this time, the entire castle was completely in chaos due to the Avengers' attack. Some technicians were sitting in front of the computer, frantically deleting all kinds of data, and throwing some paper files into the burning fireplace. The soldiers in the castle were also in a hurry, running around in the castle with rifles. Logan led a few people to carefully avoid these Hydra people, entered a long and narrow staircase, and headed deep into the castle. Shoo! In the basement of the castle, Logan suddenly leaned on a corner, put his finger in front of his mouth and hissed softly, then pointed behind the corner. "Someone is coming." After a while, there was a dense sound of footsteps. It was a small team of Hydra soldiers. As they approached, Logan nodded heavily at Klaus and Marcus. The next moment, 3 people flew out at the same time. Logan's steel claw easily penetrated the heads of the 2 soldiers, and Klaus and Marcus also wiped the necks of the 2 guards with their daggers. The Hydra team had no chance to resist and all died. This is already the 5th team they have dealt with along the way. They were all dealt with cleanly and decisively, and there was no danger along the way. After hiding the bodies of those people, Logan continued to lead a few people to explore the depths of the castle. "This castle is too big. If we continue to shine like this, let alone guards blocking it, even if there are no guards, we won't be able to find it tomorrow." Klaus looked at the passages in the basement and felt dizzy. They have been wandering down there for a long time, and it feels like there is no end here. Logan frowned and looked at the passages extending in all directions. It felt like walking through a maze. Guys like Hydra had dug dozens of kilometers of underground into their basements. Finding a scepter in such a big place is like looking for a needle in a haystack. "Look for each other separately," Logan ordered with a frown. Although he had some impression of the location of the Mind Scepter, he only remembered that it was in the basement, but he didn't know exactly where it was. After all, the drawings of the castle were not released in the movie. "That's all we can do." Marcus sighed helplessly. Although it was more dangerous to search separately, at least the chance of finding the goods was greater. "Okay, I'll look for the left." Klaus nodded and immediately walked to the left. At the same time, he used his invisibility ability and disappeared into the passage. Invisibility can save him a lot of unnecessary troubles and allow him to search faster. "Then to my right." After Marcus finished speaking, he set off cautiously. Logan continued to move forward. As the 3 of them dispersed to search alone, a graceful scarlet figure slowly walked out of the dark corner behind them, staring at the direction they were leaving. After dozens of minutes of searching, Logan found a laboratory. There were still many guards and researchers inside. Even though there was continuous gunfire outside, these researchers were still busy at the lab table. It was unknown whether they were destroying the experimental results or continuing their research tasks. However, Logan did not intend to waste time with them. He took out a few grenades looted from the bodies of the guards and threw them in. Boom, boom, boom. As the explosion sounded, the entire laboratory was directly scrapped. All the researchers and guards were killed in the explosion. Even though there were a few who stood farther away and did not die immediately, lying in a pool of blood and wailing, Logan did not let them go. He took out his pistol and decisively ended their lives. After searching the laboratory, although he did not find the scepter, Logan unexpectedly found a passage leading to a deeper place. Logan looked at the passage and walked down carefully. Soon, he came to an empty hall with no one. The Mind Scepter was placed in the middle of the hall, on a shelf, with a beautiful glimmer on the top. In addition to the scepter, Logan also found 5 light blue super serums in the freezer in the basement. Logan's eyes lit up, and without even looking at the scepter, he rushed straight into the freezer and put all the serums in his pocket. Although he knew that at this stage, these super soldier serums could not turn people into super soldiers like Steve with just one, they could still slightly increase human functions. However, there were obviously only 5 in this base, and Logan guessed that the others might be hidden in the headquarters of Strucker's base. After putting away the serum, Logan looked at the Mind Scepter, thought for a while, and walked forward to take it off, but as soon as he reached out, he felt a flash of scarlet light behind him. The next second, before he could react, everything in front of him suddenly disappeared completely. What came into view was a gloomy and terrifying sea of blood and corpses, with countless corpses soaking in the bubbling sea of blood. With his arrival, the corpses suddenly moved, and countless eyes belonging to the undead all stared at him. Chapter 99 Scarlet Witch, Mind Invasion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Whirl. At this point I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network. Logan stood in the sea of blood. The scarlet blood was icy cold, like a steel needle piercing the bone marrow. In front of him was an endless sea of scarlet. The blood washed over the corpses not far away like waves, slapping the gradually decaying bones. As Logan arrived, the corpses turned their heads in unison, and some of the skeletons and rotten corpses even turned their heads 180 degrees. They struggled to stand up from the sea of blood, and at a glance, there was no head at all. Countless corpses stood in front of Logan. Some had already rotted into a pile of white skeletons, and the World War II uniforms they wore were also broken into dirty strips of cloth. The skeletons would make a crisp creaking sound when their limbs moved slightly. Some corpses were oozing thick water, and the rotten and smelly pieces of meat fell into the sea of blood as they stood up. White maggots kept wriggling in the rotten meat, and in some parts, the bones under the rotten meat could be clearly seen. There were also some fresh corpses, with wounds all over their bodies, and the blood seemed to flow endlessly, dripping into the sea of blood, and blood was flowing on their pale faces and facial features. In the dim sky, the dead souls that covered the sky and the sun were floating. They were roaring and screaming, and the terrifying sound was like a groan from hell. Logan was surrounded by dead souls and corpses. Countless pairs of eyes stared at him, and on the sea of blood, a pair of hands suddenly stretched out from the blood, and the palms with long teeth and 5 claws waved randomly, as if to grab people and kill them. Logan, you killed us. The dead souls were floating in the air. They wailed and roared, and this sound shook the depths of the soul, as if it was fluctuating the heart. Pay your life, Logan, I want you to pay our lives. The corpses also opened their mouths, and the sharp voice seemed to pierce the eardrums. Logan, we all died because of you. In the sea of blood, the professor appeared in a rusty wheelchair. His body seemed to be a corpse that had been buried for a long time. Maggots drilled down from the top of his head, biting the professor's eye sockets, and then drilled out, and then drilled into the nostrils again, gnawing the professor's face into a mess. Caliban pushed the professor from behind. He also looked like a tragic death. All his limbs were cut off, and then they were roughly sewn up with ropes. The sutures dripped with sticky thick liquid. He looked at Logan with a miserable face. Logan, you have too many enemies. He killed us. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't die. And behind them, there are countless X-Men and former friends, Cyclops, Beast, Storm, Victor, and even Laura, etc. Logan can't count them at all. They all looked at Logan with a dull look on their faces, whispering in their mouths. Why didn't you save us? You could have saved us, we could have saved ourselves. Logan, you are the murderer who killed us. The voices of these dead souls and corpses came from all directions, echoing like the sound of Sanskrit. While recounting their sufferings, they slowly walked towards Logan. Logan wanted to escape, but he couldn't move at all. The hand stretched out from the blood held him tightly. corpses slowly came forward to bury him. They tore the flesh and blood from Logan's body, stuffed the bloody bones into their mouths, and chewed them with a crackling sound, but his self-healing factor quickly restored his broken body, and those corpses tore off the restored part again. The pain of the body being torn apart was like being tortured by a slow procession. The teeth of the corpses kept gnawing at his flesh. The piercing pain made him tremble uncontrollably. He watched his former companions gorging on his corpses, and his former enemies tearing his flesh and breaking his skeleton in anger. The pain from the depths of his soul almost made him collapse. No. 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 The fear that struck the depths of his soul made Logan tremble and speak. He pushed the corpses away violently, holding his head tightly, trying to clear his mind. Now he knew very well that he was under Wanda's illusion, but everything in front of him was too realistic, and the pain in his body was too real, so he couldn't help but sink deeper and deeper. Damn. This is an illusion, it's all fake, you don't exist at all, ah. Logan raised his head and roared, his eyes were completely scarlet, and bright red bloodshot covered his pupils. The shrill roar rippled back and forth in this gray space, as if to break through the current illusion, but there seemed to be a mysterious force pulling him, not letting him escape, and constantly washing away the memories in his mind, as if to make him forget reality and completely sink into the illusion. No. I want to go out, I can't be here, I have to go out, Logan roared, looking at the pile of corpses in front of him in fear. Oh, right, free points, I still have free points. He suddenly remembered his new skills, called up the data panel, and added free points to intelligence without hesitation, successfully raising his intelligence to 16 points. He remembered that intelligence is linked to mental ability. As long as intelligence is improved, his ability to fight illusions can also be improved. As the points increased, everything in front of him froze in the next second, and the terrifying wailing also dissipated. The world seemed to solidify and became a photo posted on the window. The windows gradually shattered, and everything collapsed with it. The sea of blood, corpses, and souls all completely dissipated as the world collapsed. Logan woke up in an instant. In front of him was the familiar castle basement, and there was silence in the dim room. Call. He looked around and couldn't help but hold his head against the wall and gasp for breath. There was deep fear in the depths of his eyes. Fortunately, he has the habit of saving free points to save his life, otherwise he might really fall into the illusion completely this time. That real feeling, even now, still made his hair stand on end. No, a frightened voice came from behind, shouting as if seeing a ghost. How is it possible? Logan was startled by the sudden sound and turned around quickly. Wanda. As soon as he turned around, he saw the woman standing behind him, wearing a scarlet trench coat, with a beautiful face and a wonderful figure. She was the future Scarlet Witch, Wanda. Logan looked at this woman who almost completely fell into the illusion, and then remembered that the only one blocking the Avengers outside was his brother Quicksilver, while his sister Wanda had been guarding the scepter. Just now, in order to quickly find the scepter, I forgot about this matter for a while, and almost fell into Wanda's hands. At this time, Wanda's eyes widened, with an expression of shock and fear. You are not an Avenger, who are you? At this time, she was full of shock to Logan. Just now, he couldn't feel Logan's heart. This was her first mistake in so many years. She couldn't believe that someone could escape her psychic attack. Logan did not answer, nor did he intend to take revenge. He just looked at the scepter and said indifferently, the Avengers are still outside. It is not a wise choice for you to stay here. Wanda noticed Logan's gaze, her expression suddenly turned cold, and she raised her hands fiercely. Scarlet light rippled around her like mist, and the weird energy spread, making the already cold basement even more gloomy. I warn you, this scepter is not yours to get your hands on. She stared at Logan, the threat in her eyes was very obvious. Logan just glanced at her, not feeling intimidated by the raging energy. He just said indifferently, you don't want me to take you away. Do you plan to leave it to the Avengers and Tony? After listening to Logan's words, Wanda was stunned for a moment, and the energy field in her hands dissipated. She looked at him in shock, her eyes full of disbelief. She didn't know why Logan knew her thoughts, but she did want to give up the scepter to the Avengers. To be precise, it was brought back to Tony in the Avengers. Of course, this is not because she wants Tony to get the scepter, but because she wants to use the scepter to completely destroy Tony. But no one except his younger brother Quine knew about this idea. But how could the guy in front of him know it? Who the hell are you? Wanda stared at Logan gloomily, fearing that he would ruin her plan. Logan ignored her, strode to the scepter, reached out and took off the scepter. Holding this heavy scepter, Logan could clearly feel the unimaginable flow of energy contained under the scepter. Seeing this, Wanda no longer hesitated, and strange scarlet energy burst out. The red light quickly spread towards Logan, as if wanting to wrap him up. When Logan saw this, he immediately held the scepter and gently tapped the spike of the scepter on Wanda. In an instant, the scarlet energy faded away, and the terrifying aura that filled Wanda's body also dissipated. She stood there with a stunned look on her face. Except for her eyes, her body seemed to be completely frozen, unable to move at all. Looking at Wanda, who looked like a statue, Logan couldn't help but weigh the scepter in his hand and sighed. It is indeed a spiritual scepter. You can subdue the enemy with just one click. It is simply a powerful weapon in combat, turning your opponent into a defenseless piece of meat. Logan looked at the scepter, smiled bitterly, shook his head, and put it back in place. The ability of this thing is indeed fascinating, but not everyone has the ability to use it. If he takes this thing now, it will only bring greater danger. Looking at Logan's actions, Wanda looked stunned and didn't understand what he meant. Logan looked at her and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I won't take this thing away. I hope your plan will succeed and make the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. suffer." He knew very well that it was obviously unwise to take away the scepter at this juncture. After all, both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra were staring at this side, not to mention that along the way, Tony and Wanda saw his true appearance. If the scepter is taken away by me, I am afraid that my face will appear on wanted posters everywhere, and both Black and White will compete to use him in exchange for the bounty. As long as you show your face, you will be targeted, and then you will be surrounded by unimaginable terror. Logan didn't want that to happen, and his main goal this time is actually the super soldier serum that he has put away. These things can allow Victor and the Professor to recover to a certain extent. This is what he values the most now. As for the scepter, the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. can take it if they like. Logan knew that Wanda wanted to use the scepter as bait to prompt Tony to create Ultron step by step, and this also caters to Logan's ideas in some respects. Although the emergence of Ultron will bring tragic disasters to some people, what does that have to do with Logan? He hoped that Ultron would make more troubles, completely disrupt the world, and attract the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers. By then, no one would care about mutants anymore, and he would be able to gain some peace. Dee. At this time, the headset in Logan's ear made a connecting sound, and Victor's voice came from the ear. "Logan, the tin guy has called for backup. We are evacuating first. You guys should come out quickly. They are about to enter the castle. Don't run into those Avengers guys, let's gather behind the castle. We're going out right now." Logan spoke into the headset, and then connected the communication between Klaus and Marcus. "The Avengers are coming, the mission is cancelled, retreat." After saying that, he turned off the headset and smiled at Wanda. "I'll just leave the spiritual scepter. I hope everything goes well for you. I'll leave first." After speaking, Logan turned around and escaped towards the safe exit. Wanda couldn't help but frown as she listened to the footsteps gradually disappearing. Scarlet energy surged in her body. After some struggle, she released the control of the spiritual scepter. Looking at the empty passageway, Wanda couldn't help but feel a chill down her back. She didn't expect that this guy she had never met could guess her thoughts and plans. This made Wanda feel extremely panicked, fearing that her plan would be exposed. "Looks like I'm late." Just as she was thinking, there was a sudden sound of footsteps in the passage. When Wanda saw this, she quickly found a place to hide her aura. After a while, Tony appeared from the entrance of the passage and carefully inspected the underground space. At this time, he had disarmed the steel armor, and there were obvious bruises on his face. After seeing that there was no one in the basement, he walked in with confidence and immediately saw the spiritual scepter placed on the shelf. "Everyone, fortunately, it's not too late. This thing is still here. You can celebrate in advance." He smiled and reported to the communicator. After finishing speaking, he walked to the scepter and looked at the scepter suspended in the middle by the magnetic levitation position. After thinking for a while, he moved his palm back. The next moment, a pair of steel gloves flew in from the passage and was put on him accurately. With the protection of the glove, Tony reached out and grabbed the scepter. Looking at the authentic scepter, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, but he didn't notice Wanda, who had appeared behind him. Buzzed out. A burst of scarlet light emerged and penetrated Tony's head. Tony was stunned for a moment, and after a few seconds, his expression was gradually replaced by fear. The whole person stood there in a daze. 20 minutes later, in the woods behind the castle, Logan met Klaus and Marcus in the woods, and also found Victor and John hiding in a big tree. "Where's the scepter?" That when Victor saw them arriving, he jumped down from the tree. At this time, his chest was a mess of blood and flesh, with large and small scars on his body mixed together, and his breath was a little confused. He had suffered a lot from the battle with Tony just now. The injury cannot be repaired quickly with the current self-healing factor. When Klaus and Marcus faced this question, they both shook their heads helplessly, and then looked at Logan together. Logan also looked helpless and said, "I didn't find it either, the castle is too big." "What now?" Marcus looked at the castle behind with a worried look on his face. "What can I do? Tell Micah the truth." Logan shook his head and added, "Now that the Avengers have entered the castle, if we sneak in again, it will be a dead end." Hearing this, Marcus and others couldn't help but lower their heads and sigh, not to mention that all the work was in vain, and the task could not be completed. Micah would have to pay liquidated damages. This would be a huge loss for the farm. Thinking that they had failed to live up to the expectations of the farm, Marcos and others felt a little depressed. Logan didn't know how to appease them, so he could only say helplessly, "Okay, let's go back to the hotel first. Tony and the others have discovered our existence, and we can't stay here any longer." A few people nodded lowly and drove back to the hotel. Logan asked them to take a rest and pack their bags later to prepare to leave. After Marcus and others entered the room, Logan quietly waved to Victor. Victor understood immediately, walked to Logan's room, closed the door, and stared into Logan's eyes. "Actually, you found the scepter, right?" That he knew Logan's character. If he really didn't find the scepter, Logan wouldn't have this attitude. If he really wanted to get the scepter, even if those people were Avengers, he would find a way to get it. After all, he still has 2 killing moves that are useless. Logan didn't hide it, nodded and said, "Yes." After speaking, he informed Victor of the pros and cons of obtaining the scepter. Taking the scepter away now would only bring greater danger. Victor smiled and said, "You are right, that thing is a bomb, whoever takes it will die." Victor unconditionally supports Logan's behavior. The matter of the scepter was simply skipped by the two of them, and Victor asked curiously, "Why did you ask me to come here?" Logan smiled and took out the super soldier serum he brought out. Victor looked at these tubes of light blue serum with confusion on his face. He didn't know what this was that deserved Logan's happiness. Logan explained, "This is the super soldier serum, something that both Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. are researching. After injection, your body will recover. However, this thing should be a defective product at present. The number of these few is too small, and the effect may not be very strong, but it is better to have it than not." After that, he took out 3 serums. "These 3 are for you to inject, and 2 are left for the professor." Victor looked at the serum and then at Logan. He knew that Logan would not hurt him, so he nodded, "Come on." After Logan asked him to sit down, he opened the injection port at the bottom of the 3 serums, revealing the needles inside, and injected them all into Victor in one breath. As the light blue liquid was injected into Victor's body, the effect of the medicine took effect instantly. An indescribable sense of pleasure made Victor couldn't help but let out a long breath, and some injuries on his arms also recovered quickly, which was visible to the naked eye. Although the chest was still a bloody mess, it could not be directly healed. However, Logan could clearly see that these heavier wounds were wriggling at a very slow speed, and the recovery speed was also faster than before. Victor looked at the minor injuries on his arms that had recovered as before, and his eyes flashed. Although this recovery speed was not as fast as when he was young, it was at least recovered a little. The physical comfort made Victor feel unsatisfied, and he jumped up from the chair excitedly. "I didn't expect that the things Hydra researched would be so useful," He hadn't felt this feeling for a long time. As if the cells were alive again, and there was a sense of comfort from vitality, and Logan was still a little disappointed when he looked at the recovery speed of the wound. No, this is not enough, we have to find a way to get more serum. In order for Victor to recover completely, at least dozens of injections of serum or other more powerful things are needed. Victor patted Logan's shoulder very open-mindedly. Don't force this kind of thing, I won't die in a short time. He could guess that these things must be very precious, belonging to good things that are hard to come by, and the degree of suffering in obtaining them is not low. Logan nodded. Now he could only take things one step at a time. Then he looked at Victor and said seriously, by the way, don't tell anyone about the serum, including Maka. He is not worthy of full trust. Please subscribe, monthly ticket, recommendation ticket support. Chapter 100, Suspicious by Nature, Advice from a Weirdo. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In fact, Logan has never really trusted Micah. From the moment he entered the farm to now, he is still very defensive about Micah. It's not that McCain didn't do a good enough job, he was able to create a safe shelter under the current situation and provide adequate food and clothing for the more than 130 mutants in the shelter. This was enough for Logan to recognize Micah's ability, but recognition is one thing, and whether to fortify it is another. The shelter needs help, and Logan will try his best to help, but if these tasks will bring great danger to himself, Logan will not carry out them. He is inherently suspicious and has never trusted others easily over the years. It is also because of this character that he has been able to live a stable life for nearly 200 years until now. However, Marcus and others were obviously different from Logan. They did not consider the danger of taking away the scepter, but were disappointed by the failure of the mission. On the way back, several people were in very low spirits and remained silent in the car. Even Klaus, who usually talked a lot, rarely closed his mouth and sighed from time to time. After Logan gave a few words of appropriate comfort, he said no more. Now he still has a headache on how to deal with Mika. Before setting off back, Logan informed Micah of the current situation and reported the mission failure. When Micah received the news, his tone on the phone was very bad. Logan could even feel the foul language he was hesitating to speak, but fortunately, he did not boldly ask Logan and the others to attack the Avengers and regain the scepter. Instead, he ordered them to come back quickly, seemingly waiting for them to go back for an interview. After a dusty journey back to the farm, before entering the door, I bumped into Lorna, who was leading a patrol. You are finally back. Lorna was very happy that they could come back safely and stepped forward to greet them enthusiastically. However, due to the failure of the mission, Marcos and others were in low mood, and they simply nodded to Lorna's enthusiasm. Lorna also noticed something was wrong with the atmosphere and looked at Logan in surprise. It's not going well. Logan nodded. The mission failed. We couldn't get the goods back. Lorna was not surprised by this. She had also heard about Logan and the others' failure. Looking at the depressed people, she sighed and comforted. No one can always go smoothly. After this failure, what else can we do? There will be a next time. Logan looked at it openly and nodded. By the way, Micah told you to go to his office when you come back. He is waiting for you in the office. After saying that, she looked at the patrolling team members behind her, then walked to Logan and whispered, "Be careful, Micah's mood is also a little wrong." Logan nodded, "Got it." After saying that, he took Victor and others to Micah's office. At this time, Micah was sitting at his desk. Because of his inner irritation, he couldn't stand the files on the desk at all. The desk was covered with messy files. After seeing Logan and others coming in, he stood up suddenly and stared at them with red eyes. This mission has caused great losses to the shelter. He suppressed the anger in his heart, gritted his teeth and looked at Logan and the others, his voice bursting out of his throat, his fist tightly holding a document, and his arms were covered with veins. Logan, I trusted you and gave you such an important task, but you failed me. He looked at Logan angrily, his throat trembling, and he was about to say some swear words, but they were suppressed in the end, but the anger in his eyes showed his disappointment. Logan was about to speak, but Victor beside him couldn't help it. He stood up suddenly and yelled, "What are you angry about? Why do you have the right to be angry?" After saying that, he suddenly tore off the clothes on his body, revealing the horrific wound on his chest that was difficult to see directly. The hideous wound has not fully recovered until now, and there is not even a single piece of good flesh on the entire chest. He pointed at his chest and shouted loudly, "Did we not try our best? Take a good look at what this is. I was almost killed by that iron guy. And that big green guy, the reinforced concrete trenches are like tofu in front of him, they will break into pieces when hit. That Thor, when he hammers down, the tanks will be overturned. How do you expect us to get rid of them? Get the goods back." Victor stared at Micah with an angry look on his face. "You only know about the losses, but do you know that all of us were almost responsible for it? We worked hard to help you, but you still have the nerve to be angry?" Listening to Victor's scolding, Micah's face changed and he gritted his teeth. "I know the situation was very dangerous, but the failure of this mission will bring us a sky-high liquidated damages. What a huge loss to the sanctuary." After listening to Micah's words, Victor became even more angry. "Okay, since you only value losses and don't care about the lives of a few of us, then okay, let's go, you follow me, we will go directly to Washington to find the Avengers and them. Grab the goods and I'll show you which one is more dangerous, that iron guy's shells or the liquidated damages." After saying that, Victor actually wanted to step forward and pull Micah away. Logan quickly reached out to stop him, glared at him, and signaled him to stop talking. He is very aware of Micah's current mentality. As a guy who is motivated to expand the shelter and shelter more mutants, what he needs most right now is money. This loss makes him one step further away from his lifelong wish. Logan said helplessly, "There is no way. The goods were hidden too deep by those guys. We really can't find them, and we don't have that much time to look for them. We really tried our best. Besides, all forces are eyeing that thing. Even if we can get it, let alone a few of us, I'm afraid the whole farm will be targeted by S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, and some forces that are ready to move." Logan sighed and shook his head, explaining the danger of the Mind Scepter. "That thing is a bomb that can raise us to the ground at any time. It's too dangerous to bring it back." After hearing these words, Maka's expression changed. Looking at Logan and others, his eyes were very deep. After a long time, perhaps because he thought that he still needed Logan and others, or perhaps because he thought that this was indeed not Logan and others' responsibility, he sat back in his chair with a look of loss, shaking his head and sighing. "You are right." Maka looked at Logan with a disappointed face. "You can't be blamed for this failure. I am also responsible. I didn't expect that thing would be targeted by S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra at the same time. This is my negligence in intelligence." Maka said, waving his hand with a tired face, "I will deal with the follow-up impact of this matter. You can go back and rest first." Looking at Maka's appearance, Logan shook his head helplessly and left the office with Victor and others. "Maka must be very disappointed with us this time." On the way back to the residential area, Marcus lowered his head and shook his head and sighed. He understood that Maka must be exhausted now. "Brother, you are really loyal to him." Victor snorted on the side. This time it was his intelligence mistake. "If we had known that the Avengers and Hydra valued that thing so much, we could have made a more thorough plan." Marcos and others also understood this. Although the failure was not their responsibility, they still couldn't be happy. After all, this matter was related to the interests of the entire shelter. Victor was speechless when he saw their appearance. He spoke again. "Besides, that thing is so dangerous. You have seen that almost all the Avengers are out. If we really want to bring it back, do you think this shelter can withstand the attack of those lunatics?" That he knew very well that bringing that thing over would only bring more terrible danger. Hydra's castle was captured. If they really wanted to hide that thing in their shelter, they didn't need all the Avengers to go out. Hulk's collision alone could destroy the entire farm. This is not an excuse. Klaus turned his head and refuted Victor. "Our mission is to bring the thing back. Even if there is danger, I believe Maka can solve it. He never makes mistakes." "You." Victor was speechless. He didn't expect that this group of people worshipped Maka to this extent. That was Hydra and the Avengers, plus a S.H.I.E.L.D. How many lives does Maka have to deal with those guys? Logan pulled Victor and signaled him to stop talking. He understood the loss of these people and their blind worship of Maka. Now they would only obey Maka's orders unconditionally, which Logan could not change at present. Okay, go back and rest first, take a good rest for a few days, and talk later. Logan spoke to everyone. Along the way, everyone stopped talking and returned home in silence. As soon as he entered the house, Victor couldn't help but complain, this group of people trust Maka too much, just like believers. Logan shook his head. It's understandable, after all, he gave them food. If it weren't for him, 90% of the people here would stay in the laboratory or prison. Maka created the shelter so that these people could live in a normal environment. For those who live in despair, it is simply a dawn for them. He is a God who saves the world. It is normal for people in the shelter to respect him. As he spoke, Logan added, maybe, this time it was just a simple misjudgment. After speaking, his expression became deep. Looking at the farm outside the window, he murmured, maybe. At this time, Caliban pushed Charles out of the room. They heard the movement of Logan and Victor. Lola also came out with them. Logan looked at the time and asked in surprise, is there no class today? Usually, school is not over at this time. Today is the weekend. Charles smiled and said, you can't expect us to be in class 7 days a week. Even if the children can bear it, my old bones can't bear it. Lola came up and hugged Logan, saying happily, I'm here to chat with the professor. He told you a lot of stories about you. Logan rubbed the girl's cute little head affectionately, let him tell you later, okay? I need to talk to the professor now. The girl nodded sensibly, let go of Logan, and ran to the sofa to turn on the TV, and Logan pushed Charles into the room and closed the door. What's wrong? What difficulties have you encountered? Charles looked at Logan's cautious appearance, a little puzzled. Logan didn't say anything, but took out 2 super soldier serums and showed them to Charles. Looking at the light blue serum, Charles was slightly stunned and asked puzzledly, what is this? Super soldier serum. Logan explained, it can enhance people's physique. Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. are both researching it. I brought back 5, 3 of which were used by Victor, and these 2 are for you. Hearing the name of the serum, Charles was stunned at first, and then he said in surprise, it's this thing. Charles had heard about the secret research plan of the super soldier serum. He knew that this thing was an extremely valuable asset for any laboratory. He didn't expect Logan to bring back so much. Logan nodded, but this thing is only a defective version at present, and it can't completely change your condition, but it also has some effects. At least you shouldn't be missing again in the short term. After that, he took out a bottle of serum and asked, do you want to inject it now? Charles looked at the serum and hesitated, it's too wasteful to give it to me. He knew the preciousness of the serum. Now he was just an old man in his twilight years, and it was really not suitable to waste such a precious thing. You are much more important than this thing. Logan smiled, then lifted Charles's sleeves, opened the serum and injected it. The light blue liquid entered Charles's body, but after only 1/3 of it was injected, Logan pulled out the needle. Let's just inject this much this time. You can't rush this. Logan was worried about whether Charles's current body could withstand the flushing of serum. To be safe, he could only inject it slowly in small amounts and multiple times. The professor nodded in understanding, feeling the vitality of the serum in his body. Although it was not much, it made him feel full and his physical fatigue seemed to be reduced a lot. Logan carefully put away the serum, hid it under the cabinet in Charles's room, covered it with something, and said, this matter cannot be told to others. Except for Victor, no one knows the existence of the serum. We must keep it secret, including Maka. Charles nodded solemnly, don't worry, I won't tell. After a pause, he took the initiative to talk about Logan's mission this time. I heard that your mission failed, but I think this is a good thing. Maka was too reckless this time. Logan nodded, it is indeed very dangerous this time, and I don't want things to become too complicated. Charles nodded, suddenly turned his head and looked outside, his expression softened, if you have time, spend more time with Laura. She needs company at this age. She not only needs to play with her friends, but also needs to chat with her family. He can see that the little girl has regarded them as family members, and she needs the company of these family members. Logan nodded, I will. He also likes this girl very much. After that, Logan opened the door and pushed Charles into the living room. At this time, Laura was staring at the TV and watching it very enthusiastically. Logan thought for a while, sat next to Laura and said with a smile, children can't always watch TV. The scenery of the nearby forest is nice. I want to go for a walk. Do you want to accompany me? Laura heard it and threw down the remote control directly, and said with joy, let's go. After that, she pulled Logan up with great interest and followed Logan out. It can be seen that she is very willing to go out with Logan. The two of them standing together really have a feeling of father and daughter accompanying each other. Logan took Laura to the nearby forest. The dense jungle was quiet, surrounded by fresh green grass. From time to time, some little squirrels stood on the branches and looked at them curiously. The breeze blew through the forest, and there were bursts of rustling leaves. The air was unusually fresh. The girl jumped in front of Logan, squatting down from time to time to tease the butterflies and the flowers, chasing the hares that suddenly appeared from time to time, and playing freely on the green grass. Logan strolled behind her, staring at the girl's innocent appearance with a kind face. Lola, are you still adapting to the shelter? He asked the girl. Lola, who was squatting in front of a tuft of grass and teasing ants with a grass path, turned around and said with a smile, of course, there are friends here, TV, and delicious food. Everyone is very happy. I like it here. Logan smiled. Compared with the laboratory where she had been staying before, this place is really a paradise. Lola opened the chatterbox, threw down the grass path and ran to Logan, and you and the professor are here too. I can chat with you, play with children, and have such a beautiful scenery to see. I don't want to leave here in my life. Logan rubbed the little girl's head and nodded with a smile. The two relaxed in this beautiful environment and chatted for a long time lying on the grass. Suddenly, the vibration of the trees in the forest alerted Logan. He stood up and looked over there, while protecting Laura behind him. A blue figure passed through the woods and disappeared in an instant. Is it the weirdo from before? Logan narrowed his eyes and said with interest, Lola, follow me, I'll take you hunting. Laura was stunned for a moment, and when she reacted, Logan had already rushed up. Seeing this, Laura had to follow in a hurry. Two figures, one big and one small, shuttled through the woods. After a while, the two caught up with the blue figure running wildly in front, who was the weirdo from before. When the weirdo ran deep into the woods, he stopped on his own initiative and turned to face Logan. After Laura caught up with him, she showed her steel claws and was about to pounce on him. With her teeth and claws bared. I have something to tell you. The weirdo spoke calmly. Wait. Logan saw the weirdo's intention and grabbed Laura's clothes to stop her charge. I didn't expect you to dare to come back. He squinted at the weirdo. You'd better have a reason to convince me to let you go. The weirdo nodded, and then remembered something, and said, I have something important, but I have to make sure first. Are you really Wolverine? Swish! Logan showed his steel claws. The silver steel claws flashed cold light. He stared at the weirdo and said, it's genuine. He could vaguely sense that the weirdo seemed to have something important to say. The weirdo stared at Logan's steel claws, frowning. But my father said that Wolverine is dead. Hearing this, Logan was a little stunned, and after putting away the steel claws, he frowned and asked, who is your father? From the tone, the other party's father seemed to know him. I can't tell you for the time being. The weirdo shook his head and didn't intend to reveal it. Then stop talking nonsense. Logan said coldly, speak to the point. The weirdo looked at Logan, thought for a while, and said, whether you are Wolverine or not, you are obviously a newcomer to the shelter. As he said that, his expression suddenly became very serious, and he solemnly warned, remember my words, don't believe anything Maka says.